Ugh, gosh. Ugh. Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, good day, good morning, depending where you are in the world. And I have viewers across the world. I do. I've got subscribers all the way from like the South Island of New Zealand to the north of Canada. So there you go. Obviously, the big news coming out of the sports news today is Stephen Gerrard's appointment at Aston Villa. Very surprised that Rangers were happy to let him go mid-season, considering they're trying to defend their SPL title. That's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see who ends up as the new Rangers manager. Also, interesting change of circumstances going from a championship-winning team to a relegation-threatened team. It'll be interesting to see how the players respond to that, and also how he adds in January. And is he given time? Is he given time? Almost if he can't save them from relegation, for example, does that damage his reputation? Or do they stick with him and a rebuild process? Because he does need to, things need to change there. How patient will the owners be with that appointment? But they were very, very quick in naming a replacement, much quicker than Spurs, for example, in the Mourinho situation. So Villa obviously quick in. They like his style of football. They like his ideas, his plans. And does this mean at some point in the future he'll become Liverpool manager? I think a lot depends on the next 8 months for Steven Gerrard at Villa. Also, England's embarrassing defeat to New Zealand in the T20 Cricket World Cup. Not surprising. I did predict New Zealand would win, and a lot of people were like, no, England will dominate. Stronger batting lineup. Wasn't the case. They were absolutely destroyed, and England's bowling fell apart. And also with the backdrop of what's going on the county cricket at Yorkshire, with that ongoing scandal, with more coming out and more allegations being made, did that have an impact on England's performance? A lot of the England players have obviously had to give, press conferences and answer questions. Did that, distract from the World Cup? If you follow the NHL, Bob Murray, the GM of the Anaheim Ducks, has resigned his position. Obviously, in the wake of the Chicago Blackhawks scandal, complaints against, obviously there are things going on there. I haven't read the full details of it, but this comes at a time when the team are in a rebuild process and etc. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the NHL and the Anaheim Ducks, and the fact that they're going to do an exhaustive process for a replacement GM. So his assistant GM has now taken over on an interim basis. It's looking likely he's going to be there for a while. But it'll be interesting to see what else comes out about the Bob Murray situation with the Anaheim Ducks. And, he's entered an alcohol rehabilitation program. So obviously there was issues with his behaviour. So that'd be interesting. Where does Gerrard rank amongst Premier League midfielders all time? Well, he never won the Premier League. I think that's one thing that's missing from his CV, is not winning the league title as a player, whilst he was at Liverpool. Obviously, he had success with LA Galaxy, but he didn't win the league title as a player with Liverpool. So I think that, while he was a great club captain and he's lifted a lot of silverware, League Cups, FA Cups, Champions Leagues, he's lifted what was the UEFA Cup, which became the Europa League. So he's had a lot of success as a player. He's never won a league title as a player. He's won a league title as a manager with Rangers, never as a player. So that's something I think that may put him down a little bit in people's rankings. But he's definitely top five. He's definitely top five. A very competitive era for English football, the Premier League era. But I would say he's top five. I wouldn't say he's necessarily number one. But then again, he hasn't been that long retired, so I generally that those kind of lists are very, very subjective, and therefore my opinion will differ to your opinion. For example, depending on how much of the Premier League you've watched. Now, I've watched every single Premier League season, and I've done a history video on the Premier League a couple of years back, which is actually on the channel if you look through my videos. It's one of the earlier videos on the channel. I've done a video on the history of the Premier League up to 2018. There were some very interesting clubs that have played in the Premier League that are now playing in League Two and League One. Oldham Athletic, Swindon Town. You've got who else is in there? It's a real surprising one. There's another one that's really surprising. That surprises people. That was a Premier League club at one point. Barnsley have been a Premier League club. Bradford City have been a Premier League club. Ipswich have been a Premier League club. So there's some surprising ex-Premier League clubs that are now in the lower divisions of English football. You know, so that's something to bear in mind. I will have to do an updated history or list of clubs that have played a season in the Premier League. Very interesting list of teams. Um, it's also surprising how few teams have actually played in the Premier League since 1992. It's generally the same top two divisions that regularly rotate. Most clubs that have played in the Premier League have spent the majority of their lives and histories in the top two divisions of English football. There's very few that have spent any length of time, percentage-wise, of their history in League One or League Two or non-league. So I think no, I think Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon, which now became MK Dons, there's a debate over the history of that. And Bradford City have spent a fair portion of their time outside the top two flights, but they're a historical club with a great history. So it's an interesting one. Gerrard's rank, I would say he's in the top five, but again, that's subjective because there are players he played against and with who are still currently actively playing club football. On retired players, he's definitely in the top five. On retired and current players, because he only recently retired a few seasons back, it's a difficult one to really subjectively go, yeah. If you're looking at past players who've now officially retired, where there is no chance they're going to return to play, then he's definitely in the top five. But I think he's lower in the top five against, let's say, Lampard and Roy Keane, because he didn't win a Premier League. Vieira, they won other titles. So yeah, for me that is a subjective list. It will vary absolutely. So again, subjective lists. There's going to be disagreements. But there's no perfect list. There's no right or wrong answer to that question. But he's definitely in the top five, in my opinion. That doesn't necessarily say your opinion. If you rank him higher than me or lower than me, that's wrong. But here we go. So, breaking news about Bob Murray, that the Anaheim Ducks, now ex-GM, he resigned. Bob Murray has resigned, this is according to ESPN, as executive vice president and general manager of the Anaheim Ducks. The team announced yesterday the move is effective immediately, and Murray will enroll in an alcohol abuse program. The decision was made one day after the Ducks placed Murray on an admin leave pending an internal investigation into allegations of improper professional conduct. Anaheim has not specified when these complaints were made or how many people have come forward. So they're being very, very, very tight-lipped, very, very vague. Obviously, with what happened, it was happening with Chicago, obviously, has definitely made Anaheim act. Assistant GM Jeff Solomon has taken over, and they've announced that they're going to remain with Jeff Solomon as interim GM of the Ducks until the end of the season. So that's until June next year. So they're making no plans right now to get someone in immediately. Anaheim's owner Henry Samueli met with Murray earlier on Wednesday prior to news of Murray's departure becoming public. First and foremost, statement, we apologise on behalf of the organisation to anyone affected by misconduct from Bob Murray. Henry and Susan Samueli said in a statement on Wednesday, adding that they fully support his efforts to improve his physical and mental health by asking for help. We expect every member of our organisation to be treated with respect and will not stand for abuse of any kind. We will now begin a methodical, extensive search for a permanent general manager to lead us forward. We expect to complete this process no later than next summer. So they may find someone before then, may not. Moments after the news was announced, the NHL released a statement tying the investigation back to its hotline news, reporting such tips and details. So obviously, in the aftermath of what's going on with Chicago, I don't think you can get away with anything anymore. We support the decision by Bob Murray to resign his position. So he obviously resigning. He's basically guilty as hell then for whatever he's done, the league wrote. While we understand that he is seeking appropriate counselling and treatment for his personal issues, so alcoholism, there is no excuse and there is no place in our league for the type of behaviour that was recently reported through the NHL hotline. We thank the Ducks organisation for his prompt and appropriate response to hotline reports. The league and its clubs are committed to a safe and welcoming workplace across the NHL and will continue to take any and all action to achieve that goal. He had been general manager since 2008. The owners, the Samueli family, will pay for Murray's rehabilitation services. So they're going to pay for his stay at rehab. Sources have also told ESPN this week that Murray's behaviour has created an abuse culture within the organisation and that many of the initial complaints involved verbal abuse. It's not that as serious as it could have been. I want to apologise to anyone adversely affected by my behaviour. He's now released a press release himself. I vow to make changes to my life, starting with enrolling in a treatment programme. I want to thank Henry and Susan Samueli and Michael Schulman, as working with them has been one of the highlights of my career. As I step away from the Ducks, I will focus my attention on where it should be, improving my life for the betterment of my family and friends. In the wake of an investigation into the Blackhawks mismanagement of the allegations by Carl Beach against former video coach Brad Aldrich in 2010, the NHL sent out a memo earlier this season to all 32 clubs that mandated any abuse be immediately reported to the league. That could be empowering more employees to come forward with workplace issues past and present. So I think more could come out. It'll be interesting to see what has occurred. And, the NHL has faced a lot of criticism, and the NHLPA, not only the Blackhawks, but other organisations linked with that, over their handling of complaints and their failure to support. So the NHLPA has faced a lot of criticism in recent weeks from current and ex-players about their handling of the Carl Beach situation and the Chicago Blackhawks situation. Kima Lou is also an ex-Blackhawks player under contract with the Bill Peters situation a couple of years ago, has also basically heavily criticised the NHLPA. So the Players Association has also not come out well out of this. Now, it'll be interesting to see further down the track what further reports come out of the Anaheim situation and what further information is released into the public domain. At the moment, the allegations are allegations, but the fact he was resigned says to me that he's done something. He's aware he has made mistakes. So that's an admission of guilt, in my opinion. But other questions will be asked about how old these issues are and how far back they go. Considering he's been in the position since 2008, so he's been there quite some time. Are the allegations by current or ex-players or employees? Are they still involved in the league? And that will be interesting as to how far that goes. But I think sport needs to wake up. Sport needs to have this conversation with itself about employee and player welfare or athlete welfare. There's been too many scandals now of complaints of bullying and harassment and abuse of all kinds, toxic working environments, toxic cultures, and there's been too much in the last couple of years coming out that are historical. Some of them are more recent. Failings by governing bodies in dealing with complaints, failures by players' unions in protecting their members and supporting their members in the aftermath. So this is not an isolated problem. I think it's not isolated to one sport, as we've seen with cricket with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club, as we've seen with the Chicago Blackhawks with two separate issues, as we've seen with the Maple Leafs with Babcock getting the sack as well over his treatment of players and basic workplace bullying. So the NHL has a pretty bad recent culture, and the press and the NHL has to be aware that obviously this is a bad look in the media when they're trying to sell the game to families. It attracts new fans and new investors. When they're trying to compete with other major leagues for TV revenue and sponsors and youth talent into getting them into their production lines and their systems, it's not a good look. And the same can be said for all sports when it comes to any scandal, be it like drug scandals, corruption scandals, abuse scandals. It's not a good look for professional sport when that happens. Football, I think, is still reeling from the FIFA corruption scandal, amongst others, in regards to the Qatar World Cup still going ahead. They've had to change the international and club footballing calendars to accommodate playing in the desert. So if you follow, the FIFA World Cup or you follow international football or soccer, the Qatar World Cup is a black stain, a dark stain on FIFA and global football. Rugby union, there's been several high-profile scandals of team misbehaviour and drugs and steroids, and rugby league as well. Cricket's had multiple scandals, match fixing and such. I've still got to go, a breakdown of the Hansi Cronje match fixing scandal and the damage to. Well, it opened fans' eyes to the fact that these weren't just rumours. This is a real problem that cricket faces. Snookers have match fixing allegations almost on a daily basis. Tennis is open to match fixing. Um, there's been all sorts of issues, corruption within governing bodies, misappropriation of funds, you know, some questionable sponsorship deals, weak enforcement of sports rules, salary cap breaches, which in my opinion are lower down the scale of sports scandals, systematic doping. So yeah, sport as it stands has a lot of issues. And each time a scandal breaks, it does damage the reputation of that particular sport or that particular governing body or that particular organisation or that particular player or manager or team owner. And it does raise questions about the health of sport. Um, right, so a lot. Frank Lampard is in talks with Norwich. So Gerrard going to Villa. Lampard, this is just broken. Frank Lampard, Norwich are in talks with Lampard. Norwich City have held talks with Frank Lampard as they look to replace Daniel Farke as their head coach. He's among a number of candidates. However, no announcement will take is expected till the weekend or early next week. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. So that's a very interesting one if he gets appointed there. Um, what else we got? Gareth Bale's made 100 Welsh caps. The Exeter Chiefs must change their club branding. Must get rid of the Native American branding. This has come from the National Congress of American Indians, calling the Premiership Club Rugby Union to drop the Native American branding. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. There's a female football player arrested and a immediate investigation of attack with teammates. Declan Rice is pulled out of the England squad because of illness. There's football news. Rugby. Not a lot really. Let's have a look. Not a lot going on there. In the European basketball, the women's 2023 Eurobasket qualifiers, Great Britain and Greece is going to be televised, which is good for basketball in the UK. Not a lot there. It's really not on. Really interesting. There's not really a lot on at the moment. But yeah, the big news is Gerrard's appointment. Absolutely disgusted with having Chris Jordan should have played for him. Look, there's a lot of fans get very reactionary when a player has a bad performance. Obviously, I've read the match report, and yeah, that it wasn't the last good five. England really bollocks the last five overs, and that is a fair assessment. They really balls up the last five overs. Oh yeah, look, there's always going to be question marks when a bowler is very consistent suddenly has like what I call a very bizarre episode of no balls or wides or generally poor balls. The England Pakistan 2011 test where the three no balls were kind of like a bit suspect. And as I was mentioning earlier, cricket and match fixing is rife, and I did say New Zealand you know, could do it. I thought New Zealand would win. Uh, so again, I get a prediction right. I'm starting to get good at this prediction stuff. Uh, some players do struggle under pressure situations. I will admit that. Um, but that is a very, very question. But also, you've got to look at the backdrop of what was going on with England cricket with the Yorkshire allegations and how much of a distraction has that been. Um, at the same time, yeah, New Zealand just stuck in there and New Zealand played how New Zealand played. But in order to actually fix a match successfully, both sides have to be involved. Into spot fixing and match fixing are two separate things. The spot fix, the bowler just literally has to bowl the no ball, and or the batsman has to get run out. Um, we have seen some really catastrophically interesting batting collapses in recent years, with several nations regularly having the batting collapse and the crazy run outs. So, in my opinion, in the first like 24, 40 hours, a lot of fans will be reactionary. And I feel, yeah, did he play badly? Yes. We can all agree, you know, Jordan didn't play very well. That's fine. Um, if it then transpires, then yeah, like there's been an attempt to alter the outcome, successful otherwise, to fix or spot fix in any way, then that for me is obviously cause for concern. The only way we would be able to definitely know if it's fixed if the betting companies go. We've seen a lot of suspicious bets coming in the lead up and during the game. Then when the red flags, because there's a system in place with betting companies and legislators and government and the police, the authorities, to go, no, we believe there is some suspicious betting patterns in place for this game or this tournament. Um, but we've seen some very crazy results, like India's first defeat to Pakistan in this format for 28 years. Um, and, um, and again, yeah, you could argue. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Ian Morgan personally myself. Um, how Irish, how Irish do you have to be? Um, but I'm not a big fan of Owen Morgan myself. Um, as captain, but that's what the ECB and the selectors and the coaches want. But when you've got, I mean, but yeah, as I say, like I'm not surprised New Zealand won. Obviously, I haven't, didn't listen to five live test match special or anything like that, so I wasn't listening on the radio. But I had a sneaky suspicion New Zealand would win. That New Zealand have proven in the last 5 years that they are consistent. They're not outstanding; they're consistent, and that's what wins you games is consistency and energy and effort. Now, obviously, Jason Roy is injury prone, and that's something that needs to be looked at. Is constantly recurring muscular injuries, leg muscular injuries. That is got to be a cause of concern long term, not only for the player but for the team. And yeah, you have to question putting in Jordan to bowl those important overs at that time, and then you also have to ask he hasn't bowled like that in the rest of the tournament. Why in that particular moment at that crucial time did it just fall apart in the last 5 overs? And then if you want to find out if the match has been fixed or there's a spot fix or a match fix, then question marks have to be raised over the red flags that would be raised by the betting companies and the authorities going, look, we've got some suspicious betting patterns, you know, we need to investigate. That's a system that's been in place now for quite some time. Um, look, I mean, the World Cup final 2 years ago in the 50 over format went down to a super over. So, as I say, look, New Zealand have been so consistent for a period of time. They're the most consistent team in all three formats. Quite literally, they somehow find a way to win games, and they are consistent, and they stick to the principles and the plan. Whether obviously um, I've got to do some paperwork in a bit for something else. Um, yeah, again, a lot of times, depending on conditions, the coin toss is crucial. If you're comfortable chasing a score, you want to bat second. That's fine. If you're comfortable chasing a score, if you're comfortable being chased, it's all about how you set up your batting lineup really, and what bowling attack you've got available. And the pitch conditions do have a big part to play. A lot of commentators say, "Oh, the toss doesn't really mean much," but If you win the toss and decide to bowl first, you have every faith in your batting lineup to chase down and attack the bowling lineup of the opposition and put them under pressure, put the spotlight on them. If you choose to bat first, you've got every faith in your bowling lineup to skip them out. But I mean, look, I have been surprised with the amount of players who not just England players, but players in general who pulled out during or got injured during this tournament or have pulled out of this tournament before and during. Um, and how some of the players have complained about being, the quarantine that they had to go through and all this. Other sports team sports, be it at club or international level, have just got on with it. Uh, there's cricket seems to have, in my opinion, at least, I think mentally, yeah, it's a very mentally demanding game. I understand that. You got, especially Test cricket, when you've got lengthy spells at the crease where you could be your first innings might last 2 days, and it's definitely a battle of mind over matter. But yeah, not winning this World Cup is yeah, is not good. I'm still interested to see the viewership figures for the 100 format as well, because the ATB admitted, even if there hadn't been any COVID, it was going to make a loss in its first year and possibly break even in its second. So, but this also, in my opinion, highlights some depth issues that England have. Um, and and but as I say, like, I'm not as big a cricket fan as I once was. I feel that again, you a lot of the issues with players like Mills, Archer, Curran, Stokes, um, pulling out of the tournament for various reasons, injury or mental health or whatever, or being unavailable. Then you have to look at the ECB. You have to look at the development of players domestically, the workload that players are going through. Uh, that is an interesting one. If you've got a very aggressive, it's an aggressive format of the game. It's a shortened format, so you want to get runs quick. Power play or not, you've got to be on the front foot. This format T20 is designed for aggressive bowling and aggressive batting and aggressive fielding. It's just an aggressive format of the game. There is no time to make an error. You've just got to go for it. Um, Especially with like teams getting punished for slow over rate, for example. It it does raise questions about the ECB's direction when it comes to uh, how they feel, you know, in regards to the T20 format. It also raises questions about the timing of the Yorkshire investigation when you've got an international team which has got Yorkshire based players playing, and how the ECB and Yorkshire have dealt with the media aftermath and the fallout, regardless of our views on it, which we've discussed. Um, but you know, we got heated about our views over the Yorkshire situation and the situation within. But the ECB have a lot of questions to answer for a lot of things, a lot of things, and their handling of a lot of situations, their handling of the TV rights, the handling of coming up with the 100 format, which appears to me was made up on the back of a fag packet whilst high on cocaine with a TV exec. And then they're famed for their drug and alcohol use and coming up with harebrained schemes just to try and get views. Their handling of the county game, the player development, the reliance on what I call plastic players, in the sense that, yeah, the eligibility rules for like getting players registered and all that. The Jofra Archer situation, the build up to the 2019 50 over version of the One Day World Cup, and yeah, well, batsman one thing, but you want to have an all round, all rounders, fielders, bowlers, wicket keepers. While they're waiting to come through, is that a detriment and causes problems for the there's an annoying hair for the Test side. Um, the future of Test cricket's been talked about with obviously cricket having to compete against other sports for the TV money. And questions do have to be asked about the county game in the white ball format and the centralised contracts and player behaviour off the field as well. Alex Hales and Ben Stokes, and that legal drama that carried on. Alex Hales' career's gone down the toilet. Um, there needs to be definitely a lot of questions asked about the direction that cricket in this country and globally is taking. Um, and the sustainability of the sport. And bear in mind, this is a sport that's competing with other team sports at club and international level for TV revenue and sponsorship and investment and grassroots players. I wouldn't say just Morgan's vendetta. I think Alex Hales himself, his behaviour off the field, and the allegations made against him, and the rumour mill about his behaviour, and whether it's Morgan or whatever, but Alex Hales himself. Well, Livingston doesn't have the same off-field issues that Alex Hale has, and Alex Hales was shot himself in the foot as well with some of his antics, and whether he sorted himself out or not at the moment, I think reputational damage is done, and other players are like, I don't want to play with this guy. He may claim he's sorted out now and he's dealt with his behavioural issues and his drug out issues and the negative publicity and his legal troubles, but that sticks with those that are not of the same mindset. It does stick in a dressing room when you've got a player he's going to be a bit of a loose cannon away from play. And cricket historically has had issues with players drinking too much and partying hard and having this lad attitude. There's a history of alcohol related incidents and legal troubles for players off the field. The fact it's a lesser sport globally, in the sense that only several countries really play it at a high standard globally, mostly ex-British Empire countries, means that like places like the US, it doesn't get the same media coverage that other international sports get. It doesn't have the same fan base in America, uh, and in places like which consider like Japan, big sports consumers, Korea, big sports consumers, South America, big sports consumers. So the other major international sporting markets, Morgan. Uh, the thing with cricket is some players can play into their forties, is like Jack Callis. Proved he was still very effective in all formats of the game until right till the end. Tendulkar kept going until quite late on. So depending on what style of cricket you play, especially if you're a batsman, you can definitely go until your late 30s, early 40s. If he steps back from captaincy, does he just focus on the county game? Uh, you know what I mean? Like, Ian Bell only recently retired, and he was in his late 30s. So, in my opinion, normally when a player is made captain of any format, their batting average does, um, you know, um, does fall. Um, yeah, that's down to the coach as well. The captain, the vice captain, as part of the leadership group, will have a say on selection of players, and that's where cricket is different to a lot of other sports. Is the captain is basically an assistant coach, and the vice captain is an assistant coach basically. So those two, I don't know who the vice captain is or the vice captains are in the T20 side, but they're basically assistant coaches to the head coach and the batting coach, the bowling coach. They have a lot of say in who plays, which is completely different to football and rugby league and ice hockey. You can have leaders in a dressing room in those sports, but they have lesser influence on training and selection and tactics. Whereas cricket is one of those weird sports where the captain and vice captains have a big say on who plays, who bats in what position, who bowls in what order, the spells. Uh, Josh Butler, I think I don't mind Josh Butler in a leadership role, but you want to keep his batting average as good as possible. And you want to keep him uh, as explosive as possible, if that makes sense. So I think having him as a captain wouldn't work anyway, regardless of his age. His style of play would, for me, would suggest that um, you would want him focusing on his wicket keeping and his aggressive batting style and getting runs. You want to keep him just as an explosive, you know, you know, ace in the pack or joker in the pack, where you can just put him anywhere. You can put him anywhere in the batting lineup. You can put him low down, high up, depends on the situation. Yeah, Stokes. Yeah, but again, I'm not sold with Stokes. You know, on his batting side of things, he has moments where he's brilliant, and then moments where he's woeful, and he's an all rounder. And you want him to be as effective in the field with the ball in hand and with the bat. And so look. I mean, Graham Smith for South Africa, for example, was named South African captain very, very early on in his career. He was very, very young. I think he was like 21 or 22 when he was named South Africa captain. So age for me is not necessarily a problem, but there has to be question marks over the selection of players and the selectors, the coaching setup, and the captaincy. Absolutely, but these are general questions that come up in post tournament reviews and post season reviews, be it domestic club teams or international teams in all sports. Um, if you have a really disappointing tournament, which I think England would definitely be classed as disappointing in this case, um, it puts added pressure on the Ashes series. Um, and with what's going on with Yorkshire as well, puts even more spotlight on a team that, in my opinion, there's a lot of question marks over the sport in general. Um, but I don't follow it as religiously as I used to. Um, don't get me wrong, I still love the sport. If I can watch cricket, I will. Um, well, we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, and you know how both sides approach it. I think it's going to be a very close series. I can't see a whitewash, but I think again it's down to the selectors. It's down to the coaches and the captaincy and the vice captain. A lot of question marks are there, um, and Joe Root. I'm not sold on Joe Root as the Test captain, not by a long shot. Uh, And that's then a question mark of your bowling depth. Then, if you lost your three best bowlers, that's bowling depth. Uh, it's all well and good having a strong batting lineup or batting side of the squad, but if your bowling depth is decimated and you lose your best bowlers, then that's a problem. You're then putting added pressure on the batting lineup to perform. And yeah, when you've lost like your best bowlers, then you're in trouble. And then question marks have to be asked of why was this particular bowler left out. Um, there's going to be a post mortem that goes on. How much then that puts their pressure on the Ashes series is another question. Um, but there's a lot of media spotlight on England for the wrong reasons right now, and cricket in general for the wrong reasons right now. There's not a lot of positive stories coming out about cricket at the moment. So, regardless on our opinions on certain things, the media are feasting on this, and that adds a lot of pressure to yeah, to players to do stuff. You know, I I'm a pretty pragmatic kind of fan. I mean, if if there is bad behaviour, it needs to be called out. Obviously, we as fans can obviously criticise selections and players, and and their attitude or their technique, and then but it's obviously got to be done in the right way as well. Obviously, we've got to you know um, you know so in that regard, like it's just, we're going to have differing opinions. I mean, the IPL. I mean, the fact it was suspended and restarted late, and they tried to rush it through, and then we had issues with a test match in the summer getting cancelled because India basically had a COVID outbreak, and then question marks were asked about the quarantine procedures. Well, that's on the selectors. That's on the selectors. The players themselves have to look themselves in the mirror and go, "Where can I improve?" And you got the players have got to take criticism and I go, "Yeah, I didn't play well here, or I thought I played well here." So that's on the coaches as well to make sure that they dissect technique issues, fitness issues, um, mental issues if the player is not in the right headspace. And we can dissect this about like football, rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, NFL, why certain teams have um, issues. It all depends on what viewpoint you're coming from. Is the Bruins' perfection line a top 10 in NHL history? Again, that's subjective. I've only been watching ice hockey since 1992, so uh, you know, my viewpoint on top 10 scoring lines or checking lines or defensemen or players is purely subjective. Um, I'm more than happy to look at the Bruins perfection line or the Legion of Doom or the French Connection at Buffalo, but some of these players I haven't seen play. Again, it's subjective. And that's a more in-depth question where I'd have to look back and go, right, what was their win percentage when they were playing together, points per season, points per game, their high, where they ranked on points totals and scoring totals in the end of season rankings. And then that's more of a stats video. And I go from, is it an aesthetically, how they play? Is it how what percentage of how important are they when they're not playing as a three? How effective are they when they're chasing a game? If they've got to do a comeback, how what percentage of goals and points do they score out of a team? So that is a subjective one. The media likes to dub, the Legion of Doom, the French Connection, the perfection line. That's more of a media thing. Yeah, so that's a lot of media pressure as well. And that's a lot of pressure on me to now do a subjective video. And of course, people are going to disagree with what I say, but you've got to look at what they've won as players. The awards each player's got. How many titles have they won? And in my lifetime, the Bruins have won the Stanley Cup once, so that's an interesting one. The under 21s against the Czechs. I think we've got our little golden generation right now of England players that have come through just before them. Um, I think in regards to what's going on, I don't follow the under 21s. I don't follow the under 19s. Um, but the group of young players we've got now playing in the senior squad and in the Premier League and Championship, a lot of young players have come through at the same time that are doing very, very well. And it's puts a lot of extra pressure on the players in the production line coming after them to not only equal the feats of those who've just gone before, but surpass that. I think the media is putting a lot of extra pressure. But again, your coaching question marks have to be asked about the coaching and, you know, the, the win percentage. Are these players developing correctly within the national setup? Are they getting enough game time at their clubs? How is their club form? So that's a much wider issue. But the FA have made a lot of mistakes. Not just in the international setup, but the club game and the direction that the sport is taking. That's my opinion on the FA. I mean, my opinion on the FA is not a positive one, and hasn't been a positive one for quite some time. Um, we There was a critical lack of leadership during COVID with the FA, and a whole host of other issues that predate the pandemic. which the FA have handled very, very poorly in both the men's and women's games, um, which we're coming out of now. Um, and you know, we'll have to see what happens if they lose, they lose. I mean, I don't follow the youth levels when it comes to the international game, uh, but it is nice to see so many young British players playing in the British leagues and getting game time, and also playing at other clubs around Europe as well. I think that is a positive. Um, but again, failure to qualify for a tournament does generally, or failure at tournaments does generally lead to a media post-mortem, and then the post-mortem from the governing body and the coaching setup, and people losing their jobs and all sorts. So there's a lot of question marks in there. Just curious because I was at TD Garden a couple of days ago watching them play, and for their age, they look for. Yeah, I think the Bruins have I think overachieved constantly with what they've got, because they don't draft early on in the draft because of where they finish. They constantly make the playoffs. There's got to become a point where they're going to have a down season. And Patrice Bergeron, I mean, how much longer can he go? I mean, Marchand, I think, yes, he's an agitator. He's a pain. But how many more suspensions before that actually hurts the team? Pasternak, they're not getting any younger. And especially Patrice Bergeron, when he goes, that's I think going to be a hard void to fill for the Bruins. Hudson-Odoi, again, Hudson-Odoi is an interesting one. I think that's an interesting. His time at Chelsea's been up and down. His development at Chelsea's been up and down, depending on who's the manager. Smith Rowe has been playing well. He's hit a perfect patch of form, and he fully deserves on form to be in the England squad. It's just how Gareth Southgate will use him, and of course we have our views on Southgate. We're both anti-Southgate in the style of play that England plays. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. With Smith Rowe, Arsenal play a different style to England. Will he be playing in the right position? How much game time will he get? Will he just be there for the experience of training with the first team squad? Hudson-Odoi, he's an enigma. He can be brilliant one week, poor the next. Yeah, well, Chris Sutton did that, didn't he? And I'm a Blackburn fan. Obviously, the SAS Sutton and Shearer, one of the best strike partnerships Premier League's ever seen. For when they were playing together for their goals per game and their goals per season. And Chris Sutton was top goal scorer in the English Premier League several seasons. Sutton thought he was, above that. And then it raises the country club debate, and we have that a lot in rugby union and football, the club country debate. I think for me, if you're given the opportunity at any level, in any sport, to represent your country, you should take it. If you're fit and you're good enough, and it's part of your development. If you're told, okay, you are eligible to play for the under 21s or the under 19s, but also we believe you can play in the first team squad. I would take that. Best advice you've ever been given in sport: effort. Put the effort in. Train hard. Um, Learn from your mistakes, but yeah, effort. Effort takes you a very, very long way. You can be as skilled as you want, but if you don't put the effort in, you're going to be found out. Um, just effort, and application. You may not be as skillful, but if you put the effort in, you'll get noticed. If you train harder or longer, and you work on your weaknesses, and you put the effort in, I think it goes a long way, because you can be not the most skilled player in the sport you play, but if you are a hard working, energy team guy, your coaches are going to love you. If you are a skilled guy who's arrogant, lazy, big ego, but doesn't train hard and doesn't put the effort in because he believes talent alone will get him there, then yeah, you're going to be found out. Your teammates may not like playing with you. And that's team sport. Individual sports, it's all about setting yourself realistic achievements and goals, and you've got to train and You train and put the effort in. Um, Effort is what gets you where you need to be. Effort, good attitudes, team player. Um, that was the best advice I was ever given. That was the advice I was given at school. That was the advice I was given throughout any sport I've attempted. Is just try it, try your hardest. Um, you know, if you don't make the team, it's not the end of the world because you know you've done your best. And I went to school with some guys who are now playing professional rugby union, and yeah, there's a reason why they've made the professional ranks. There were some other kids I went to school with who were so talented, and they thought talent alone could get them, to where they are. I couldn't have myself seeing teammates lose and play poorly when I could have made a difference to the team. I've obviously, again, some of Eddie Jones's selections, he does, especially in the forward pack and in the back line. Certain positions where you've got to be. Tuilagi on the wing is not necessarily a bad thing because he's played there before and he is a very destructive ball runner. Get that out. He likes. He's very destructive with ball in hand. So Tuilagi on the wing is not necessarily a bad thing, but having like you know a very interesting back row where you haven't got really if the six goes down injured, they're in trouble. And especially if you've got two specialist number eights on the bench, that says to me they're going to be battling at the breakdown. They're going to target the breakdown, and I think they're going to target the line out. He's giving away a lot there. If you've got a utilitarian guy, you can play all three positions in the back row. That's different. But going with you know uh, three specialist eights, that that is an interesting head scratcher because that does affect how your scrum works. If one of those number eights can also play second row or blind sort of right side flanker, that's different. But if they're specialists, then that's a bit of a head scratcher because that does affect how the scrum works. It does affect how the breakdown works. Um, that's an interesting one. But I don't see a problem with Tuilagi on the wing because he's a big unit and he is destruct very destructive with ball in hand, and he can also come in and do those support runs in the middle of the field, come off his wing. So in that regard, Tuilagi is not the worst selection ever. He has played wing before at club and country, so that's not the end of the world. He's better as an outside centre. I would say defensively on the wing, he's a bit suspect, but I'm more. It's more of a. I'm not a big fan of Farrell. He's a bit one-dimensional at times, and he can allow his emotions to dictate the game. And when you get him riled up and misbehaving, that's a problem. Because England's penalty count has, for me, been too high for too long. And it's not just an Eddie Jones squad problem. This is a problem England have had for about 20 years. The penalty count for England is always too high. It's above average for international rugby union, and that is an ongoing concern. Their discipline's not good enough. You cannot hope to win consistently when your penalty count is that high, unless you've got a pretty solid defence and you're happy to give away 3 points. But if the penalty count is still too high, you're going to be spending a lot of time with 14 or 13 players on the field. And we've seen that with England before, where they've been down to 13 players in test matches. So that's a concern for me. Farrell, while he's not starting, you can play Farrell at 12. I think Farrell's better as an inside centre than a fly half. Um, Again, I I do, in my opinion, Australia are not the strongest of the Southern Hemisphere nations. They're in a purple patch of form, admittedly, but for me, they're not the strongest of the Southern Hemisphere nations. But I think, yeah, they could upset England at the weekend. Well, when you say Australia are good again, they're in a purple patch of form. There's still a lot of issues with Rugby Australia. There's still a lot of issues over, the the direction of the team, the game in Australia itself domestically, um, the quality of players coming through. They are in a purple patch, yes, um, but is that a false dawn, or are they peaking at the wrong time? Um, you know, I think all four Southern Hemisphere nations are quite good. I think the quality in in the men's game, you've got the four dominant, you've got the four powerhouses in Argentina, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia from the Southern Hemisphere. The Six Nations, that's a different kettle of fish. Although Scotland did beat Australia last week. Um, Japan obviously were I think for me disappointing so far. But I like watching the tier two and tier three nations play because it's a bit more. It's different. It's just you see players you don't normally see. It's a more interesting contest. They are playing for the love of the game. Some of them, when it comes to how much they're paid, I think it's almost like a different sport when you watch the lower ranked nations play, and I find it more enjoyable and a bit more fun to watch, if I'm honest. In regards to look, you've got to obviously look at we're midway through the World Cup cycle, so I think trying some new tactics, trying out new players, blooding some new players, giving new players game time is important. Um, I think it'll be different in the Six Nations with the squad that's on the field, unless some of these young players coming in, like Marcus Smith and Radwan being around the first team squad, they may get some game time, and depending on how they perform. Oh, Romania are very, very good. Yes, Romania have had a professional setup for quite some time. Well, they were one of the first nations to adopt professionalism. They actually do have a professional league in Romania. Their best players play in France. Some Romanian players have played in England and in the Celtic nations, so they shouldn't be underestimated when it comes to development. They've been going through a little bit of a downswing in the last couple of years. Um, but Romania have always produced pretty solid forward packs, and they're starting to become a little bit more exciting in their back line. But they've the, the funding in Romania is not what it was under the communist regime back in the day. Ceausescu loved rugby union. They had a big lot of funding from central government, which post communism is not the same, but it is played at a reasonable level domestically, and there's a lot of and it's well supported domestically as well. Same with Georgia as well. Again, communism. There was a big interest in some of the more Western sports. Um, Best striker of the ball you ever seen in football? Roberto Carlos for dead ball. Roberto Carlos, the bend and the swerve and the spin he could get on a ball was ridiculous. Roberto Carlos for me. And I was fortunate enough to see him play, so I can definitely say that with some certainty. Roberto Carlos. If we're going back to previous eras, so many South American players did some crazy stuff. Ridiculous. But no, Roberto Carlos for me, with what he could do with a dead ball and what he could do with a moving ball as well. And for a defensive player, he scored a lot of goals. Cafu is another one um, who could do insane stuff with the ball at his feet. But for striking the ball, for the amount of power, bend, spin, and swerve, Roberto Carlos changed my mind. There's got to be a player coming along who can do it as consistently and for as long as Roberto Carlos. Then my mind may change. But Mason Greenwood, he might have another 15 years. He might pull out some firecrackers, but for me, yeah, Roberto Carlos. Have I got a bit of bias in there? No. I remember that goal in '97 in a friendly against France, against where he just Barthez was just all at sea. Um, Trent Alexander-Arnold, he has had some injury problems, and that is something that both Liverpool and England have to manage. Is he obviously missed the Euros with a hamstring thigh injury, um, but England and Liverpool play two different styles. There's your difference. There's your answer. Is the style of play, the tactics employed, the team he plays with, the relationships and the combinations you build up. Um, so for me, some players do better at club level than international, and the opposite is also true. Some players do better at international level than at club level, and people go, "Why? Well, he's crap at club level, but he can perform." It's all about mentality, style of play, the tactics employed. Does it suit? Is he given as much leeway to do that? Well, he's one of the best crossers of a ball right now in English football. Yes, and possibly European football as well. He's consistent with it. It's not like he can just pull it out of the hat every now and then. It is a consistent, almost every, we'll say 85% of the balls he crosses are generally in the right areas. They get a shot or a chance that they either create opportunity, get a shot target, or a goal results. Um, in that regard, yes, he is one of the best when it comes to dead ball and open play, getting it into the box or into dangerous areas with his pass selection. No, there's no dispute on that. FIFA World Cup next year, as things currently stand on form, I'll go Italy, um, but don't count out countries like Brazil, um, and there could, but I think it's a very open tournament. Italy are my favourites right now, but I think we're too far out. A lot can change in 13 months. Um, Players could get injured, players could be ill, suspended, retire. This is where I think the Euros benefited some nations like England and Italy by delaying it a year because young players come through, form changes. Um, but at the moment, as things currently stand, Italy at the moment, but 12 months' time, that could be different. Their form could suddenly, that winning streak, that unbeaten streak could end. Some of their key players could get injured or suspended. Chiellini, how much longer has he got left in the tank? In defence with Bonucci alongside him. There's a few question marks in there about how you know, but yeah, but a lot can change in a very short space of time. But at the moment, I would say Italy. But the conditions might be a complete leveler. We could have a complete outsider do very, very well that we're not expecting to do well. Is it time for Belgium finally to justify being regularly ranked in the top 5 in the world? Can they actually finally get over the hump? They promised much for the last 10 years. Can they finally deliver? Um, can Spain figure out how to play with a striker? Would be nice. Because what's Portugal going to look like? Is Ronaldo going to go for one more tournament? Messi with Argentina, is he actually going to go for one more tournament? I think conditions will be a leveler. I think it's going to be a surprise winner. I would think possibly could do it. But Italy right now, if we're going by form and how they're playing and how they adapted so well to a pan-continental tournament in the Euros where conditions were different in each city, playing it at an odd time of the year could affect how teams prepare. But Mancini, he's got it down to a T. Italy look pretty indestructible right now. They look terrifying to play against. What club do I support? I'm a Blackburn fan when it comes to football. When it comes to rugby league, I follow the NRL and the Canberra Raiders. When it comes to the NHL, I think that's the Winnipeg Jets. Second team is the Coyotes, who are having a disastrous season. Let's not even go with how bad they're playing right now, but that's by design, not by accident. Rugby union, I don't really have a favourite team. I like the Exeter Chiefs. I like Harlequins when it comes to rugby union. I like Benetton Treviso when it comes to the Celtic League, or the Pro League, or now the United Rugby Championship, or whatever it's called now. Um, so I have little soft spots for them. I don't outwardly I support a team when it comes to rugby union. Uh, I'm trying to think now. I think that's all the sports covered that I really. I mean, I have soft spots for certain teams in certain leagues, but I wouldn't say I outright support them. I just like the style of play they play, or the players that play for them. I even sometimes like the jerseys they wear. Um, but yeah, I have a video up on the channel of the teams that I support and why. Um, it's a bit dated now, but I do have a video up on the channel of the teams I support and how long I've supported them and why. And obviously, my to-do list is to go to the Canada in the US and see the Jets and the Coyotes play and do a Canadian NHL tour where I go to the 7 NHL arenas in Canada. I want to go to Canberra to GI Stadium. I want to see the AFL and NRL Grand Finals. I think that's on my bucket list. I want to see at least a game of the Stanley Cup Final, but that's near on impossible to get bloody tickets for. It really generally is. Um, so, you know, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, some of these things happen. But some of my bucket list may never be fulfilled. It's just something I've got to accept as is. In regards to what club do I support, I'm more a fan of rugby league and ice hockey than football these days, and that's been the case for quite some time. And again, there's a reason I've got my top 10 favourite sports, and football is not in the top five. Football is not in the top five. So, and that surprises a lot of people because the majority of my videos are football videos. But that does surprise a lot of people that football is not in my top five favourite sports. Yeah, I discuss it the most because it is the global game. It has the biggest annual revenue for a professional sport globally. The Premier League and the other big European leagues have massive revenues, big appeal globally. Whereas some of the other sports that I follow have smaller international footprints and smaller fan bases, smaller revenues. But I find them more enjoyable. Uh, so yeah. Oh, we can't lose the Boxing Day games because that's a big thing for the TV calendar. The Boxing Day fixtures, massive thing for TV, and that would obviously have to the TV rights. The TV companies have a big say, and obviously fans have been critical of. We used to have matches fixtures on Christmas Day until I think the late '60s. The Christmas Day match, which doesn't happen anymore. It's like the American football on Thanksgiving. It's like the NHL, for example, shuts down for a whole week over the festive period. Um, it will be. It's going to be interesting. The fact they've only got 6 days between the final and the restart of the Premier League. I mean, some of those players are going to be dead on their feet, absolutely dead on their feet. Um, you know, the fact it's been playing at that time of the year, it shouldn't affect some of the European leagues. They regularly have like a 2 week shutdown, but it's gonna cause fixture chaos. And bear in mind, FIFA have still got this idea that they've tabled of their of a proposal, so it's not set in stone. It's got to be voted on, and the threat that, bearing in mind, the Scandinavian Football Association, we've got it's only Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Iceland, and the Faroe Islands are threatening to withdraw from FIFA should and boycott FIFA should this go ahead. Now, the Swedes have got a great history, and the Norwegians have, and the Danes have got great history in World Cups and Euros. And while they are smaller footballing nations, and their leagues aren't necessarily as famous or as big, as some of the other European leagues. The history of those nations. Sweden's hosted a World Cup. Denmark's won a Euros. Norway and Sweden have got to semi-finals and quarter-finals. Norway's won the Women's World Cup more than once. Um, they've hosted tournaments. They've had some world class players play for them. If they're threatening, and these are big power brokers when it comes to European football, because these are wealthy nations. Their top players play in the biggest leagues. They are big sports consumers. They are sports mad countries for the population size. They do well at Olympics. They do well at World Championships. when it comes to the sporting global sports imprint, when you've got some high profile international sporting nations that are threatening to boycott future tournaments, it's not, you know, a good look. Considering that in the part, I mean, Sweden have had some superstar players. Denmark, have had some superstar players. Um, it, it it's not a good look when you've got some key parts of UEFA, and they are key components going. We could boycott should you go to a 2 year cycle. It won't happen for at least 7 years should they decide to vote it because they've already set in stone when Canada, USA, and Mexico are going to host the World Cup in 5 years' time. That's already set in stone. But it does affect the bidding process, the infrastructure to get it ready to tournaments, and they also want to expand the tournament. So that's going to be just carnage to do it every 2 years. Um, Absolute carnage. And I think other FAs, domestic football associations, and governing bodies will possibly follow suit. And then you've got to get the various domestic players' unions on board as well. And I think anyone with half a brain will go, well, this will just go player welfare. Player welfare will definitely be put forward. But looking at that, 6 days between end of tournament and Premier League restarting, I don't think is enough time. Not enough time. Let's say for example, England get to the final, hypothetically. Let's say it's England and Italy in the final again, which is a hypothetical. It could happen. Or bear in mind most of the Belgian teams seem to play in England. That would be interesting. Have I ever considered doing an England best 11 for fun? I've done it for cricket. I've done my global 11 and England during like the summer when there's not a lot of sport going on. But because I cover more than one sport, that's if I was solely a football channel, that would make more sense. Because I'm a multi-sport channel, which is different to a lot of other sports channels out there, which generally are based on one team, so it's fan TV basically, or it's based on one particular sport. It's a bit more difficult because I've got to cater for and of course that'll be subjective. So that'll be for me player. I have to look at every single England squad since 1992 for me. So therefore it's subjective. So any player who played before 1992, I haven't seen play. I'm lucky to have seen Gary Lineker play, so I can get Gary Lineker into contention. But there'll be a lot of players right now that won't even make the subs bench. I think a fair number of my starting 11. I mean, I have to get the whiteboard out as well and have to rejig the flat, and that's going to be a frigging pain in the arse. I've just realised I've got to do a lot of logistics in my flat. I might. No, the weather's not good enough to do it outside because there's a chance of rain tomorrow, and I could do it tomorrow, but it's going to piss down with rain. I don't want to risk getting the laptop wet, the lighting as well. It gets dark. I've got a long day tomorrow. I'm not going to be back in the flat till about 4 o'clock, so that's going to be my all-time best 11. That's piece of piss. Piece of piss. I think I've done it before. I think I've actually done it before. I know I have done an all-time. I have done it. It's on the channel. I have done one. I've done a pre. I think I have done one. I think I have. I'm gonna have to look now. Yeah, maybe look. But looking at, I think I have done an all-time best. I think I have. I know I've done football and cricket starting 11s and I've done player profiles on playing history and a variety of sports. So I think I've done one. But I don't think any of the current England squad would get into my fantasy England 11 plus bench. I don't think any of them will. I don't think any current Premier League player will get in there. I don't think so. I think for me, I don't think so. I think, as I said, I think the quality level of football now is less than what it was. So I think a fair few of. I think Matt Letizia. Yes, I have done an England. I have done an England one. I've done a Premier League one as well. I've done an overseas one as well. I have done. They are on the channel. About 2018. I have done one. I have done my own. I have, and I will stick by what I've selected. To get into my all-time England 11, you have to have retired, and I've had to have seen you play. So that's really interesting. My life, I have. I would suggest if you are interested, go on my football playlist, and there's over 1,000 videos on there, so you're gonna have fun. And type in England 11 and footballing 11 and Premier League 11. I think I have done one. I remember doing it. It was in my old house with the whiteboard, so I have done it. And I remember because Matt Letizia is in my midfield, and Sir Bobby Robson is the manager. I have done it. I've done it. I've done Premier League 11, England 11, and Fantasy 11. And none of the players in any of those teams are currently playing. I think the latest one retired, mid 2000s. There you go. I have done it. It's a good question. I've done it. It took me a while. It's been 3.5 years, but I have done one. Um, um, but am I surprised with the situation at Yorkshire? No, I'm not. Um, I'm surprised with how badly it's been handled. I'm not surprised there's allegations of misconduct or anything like that. It happens. We have scandals in sport all the time. Nothing surprises me anymore. I am surprised with how poorly it's been handled over the last 12 months since everything became public. How badly it's been handled by the ECB and Yorkshire. That I am surprised how badly they've dealt with the whole situation. Same with the NHL, with several scandals in the NHL, which has engulfed Chicago and other teams, and now Anaheim are, looking for a new GM for a similar situation, with negative, toxic culture. Give you my thing again tomorrow. Is that the Nations League, or are we talking about qualifiers for the Euros or World Cup? Because I've got to check now because it's international football, and I don't know. Let me have a look. You put me on the spot because I know players are injured and suspended, and so therefore that's going to affect what I say because what I say is going to probably be wrong. Let's have a look. Let me have a look. I want to see who's available first. Oh, if it's qualifiers, Albania. Let's have. Oh, if we come away with less than 6 points, then that's a joke. In my opinion. If England come away with less than 2 wins, then there will be question marks. We're going to beat San Marino, it's but a question of how much. But scores and fixtures. Let's have a look. World Cup qualifying European. What time's the kick-off today? We have games. Azerbaijan. Well, let's have a look at the World Cup qualifiers today. Azerbaijan play Luxembourg at 5 o'clock. Republic of Ireland playing Portugal at 7:45. Armenia playing North Macedonia at 5. Germany Liechtenstein's at 7:45. Romania Iceland 7:45. Georgia Sweden 5. Greece Spain 7:45. Russia Cyprus 5. Malta Croatia 7:45. Slovakia Slovenia 7:45. 3 friendlies: Serbia playing Qatar, Czech Republic playing Kuwait, Ukraine Bulgaria. South America, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Paraguay, Chile are playing. Loads in Africa. The Asia, there's a couple games left to play. Nothing really special there. Brazilian football, nothing special there. Right, let's have a look at tomorrow. Oh, these are some interesting fixtures tomorrow. Italy plays Switzerland, Northern Ireland play Lithuania, Moldova plays Scotland, Austria playing Israel, Denmark, Faroe Islands. Well, that's interesting enough. Andorra play Poland. England play Albania at home. So yes, I do expect us to win that. If we don't win that, I'm going to have a lot of questions. But Hungary, San Marino. League One tomorrow. Bolton playing Crewe at the 8 o'clock kickoff. That's an interesting game. League Two, Hartlepool playing Newport 7:45. Let's look at Saturday because the lower leagues are interested because the FA Cup's obviously meant that there was no League One or League Two action. League One tomorrow. Accrington Plymouth is 3 o'clock. Wimbledon Cheltenham is postponed because of international call-ups. I think you've got to have a minimum of 3 players called up to international duty for your match to be postponed in the lower leagues. Burton are playing Charlton. Doncaster Fleetwood's been postponed as well because of internationals. So Shrewsbury, Rotherham, Sunderland, and Lincoln. There's a fair few games called off because of international. Shows the depth of international football now. Ipswich play Oxford. MK Dons playing Cambridge. Sheffield Wednesday playing Gillingham. That's probably going to be a draw to Sheffield Wednesday. Wycombe playing Portsmouth. League Two, Swindon Crawley has been postponed because of international call-ups. Couldn't make this shit up, could you? I mean, a minimum of 3 players have to be in that fixture called up. Port Vale playing Bradford at 12. Carlisle Barrow at 1. Bristol Rovers at 3. Exeter Oldham at 3. Rochdale Leyton Orient at 3. Scunthorpe without a manager. Salford at 3, Stevenage Mansfield at 3, Tranmere Sutton at 3, Walsall Harrogate at 3, National League, all 3 o'clock spot from Stockport and Bromley. And then we get into the leagues that I couldn't give a toss about. No offense. But there's some very interesting. What a postpone. I'm really surprised by the amount of games postponed as well. That's really interesting. Have I been to Cardiff? No, I have dignity. Their football team, Cardiff City is an interesting club. Their Premier League history isn't great. They haven't been very successful. The ownership, not all fans are on board with the ownership. I would go with Ramsdale and goal over Pickford. I'm not Pickford. Yeah, great at shot stopping. Doesn't command the box. Have I been to Cardiff? No, I haven't. I have been to Wales. I haven't been to Cardiff. But Cardiff City, they should, yeah, they should definitely play at a higher level. They're just not. It's the ownership is a bit of a nut job, basically. I'll go with Ramsdale. While Pickford's got too many errors in his game and doesn't command the box, and that's what you need is a goalkeeper is commanding of the box. He makes too many errors under the high ball, under crosses. He can be a bit flappy. Shot stopper, brilliant. Penalty stopper, he's brilliant. But open play from crosses, he's suspect. And in the sweeper keeper role, he makes some really poor decisions, and I would go with Ramsdale, give him a shot. That's my opinion on that one. Pickford's just he can't. It depends on the free kick style. He's had his moments where he's made a hash of it and he's been brilliant at others, but positionally from free kicks, he's a bit suspect. From direct and indirect, from crosses, he's suspect. He's a good shot stopper, but too many errors in his game. That's again personal opinion. I'll go with Ramsdale. I'll go with a player who's in form. Everton aren't in form right now. Arsenal have hit a bit of a purple patch. They're turning things around. Everton not so much. So I would go with the player in form. That's again personal opinion. I mean Ben Foster, he's still a good goalkeeper. Yes, he's played for Watford, but I don't know for his experience. But again, subjective. Pope, Heaton, there's loads of other keepers out there I think are better than Pickford for save percentage, commanding the box, better all round. But Southgate's obsessed with the sweeper keeper as well, and I just don't know with Pickford. I'm never confident with Pickford in goal. And again, it would be interesting to see the Everton fans' feedback on that and how Everton fans feel about Jordan Pickford. But when I'm watching England play, I always watch it with one eye closed, going, "What's he going to do next?" He's very unpredictable. And the sweeper keeper, I'm not a fan of the sweeper keeper kind of idea. I prefer to have a genuine out and out sweeper, but that position syndrome was died out in the game. Very few clubs employ a deep lying midfielder who can also become a deep lying defender. So you don't play the offside trap, but then you take a lot of pressure off the goalkeeper by having that player just sweep up the loose ball and then start attacks. Um, oh yeah, look, I remember watching those friendlies before the World Cup. I just with Pickford, and I remember like yeah, Ukraine playing. It's just heart in your mouth stuff with him, and I don't know how long he can keep doing that and getting away with it. In my opinion, um, he has cost games. You know, he has made mistakes in games. He's also pulled off some brilliant saves as well. Don't get me wrong; he's a highlight reel goalkeeper for good and bad. But you need someone with a little bit more patience. You don't have to be a sweeper keeper. If you think back pass, you haven't got an angle, put it in Rose Ed. Just leather it. That's my opinion. I'm not a fan of the sweeper keeper. I've never have been. I think it's too much risk involved. I'd rather go if you're going to play sweeper keeper, just go with a sweeper. Go with that player who can play a defensive midfield role when you've got the ball, and when you're without the ball, he drops back deep, taking pressure off the goalkeeper uh, and break up play. You need a player like that. You can start attacks, and then it saves. You know, how do I put it? The fraught danger with the offside trap and getting exposed. Um, you just have to have a little bit of pace about you, good situational awareness. You don't necessarily have to be good in the air. You just literally have to good with distribution. David Luiz, ironically, would be a great sweeper um, because he's got a bit of mobility about him. David Luiz would be brilliant as a sweeper if he was playing in the 70s and the 80s. Unfortunately, the game has gone with you've got to have the sweeper keeper like a Manuel Neuer. And Manuel Neuer is mistake prone as well. Just because he's one of the best goalkeepers in the world doesn't mean he's very good at what he does all the time. Schalke and Munich fans will tell you he is mistake ridden, but he gets away with it because the teams he was playing for tend to score a lot of goals. Um, that's why having a sweeper is good because you can have that deep line player who can slingshot himself from behind the back four and drive. You need someone who can drive with the ball at his feet. And that's why I love watching sweepers play. Um, I was actually a bit of a sweeper defensively when I was playing outfield, but I was better as a goalkeeper. But as a sweeper, all you do is you tackle and you pass the ball. That's it. You lie deep in defence and then you drive forward and you start attacks and then you go back into just hovering out on the halfway line. And occasionally you come up for corners and free kicks. That's it. Um, that's again personal opinion, personal views on football positions and why I think the sweeper is a dying art and it needs to be resurrected. And there are coaches out there who do use sweepers, and that takes the pressure off the goalkeeper. That means the goalkeeper is less likely to make an error and can focus on keeping the ball out of the net rather than playing the way Pickford and Neuer and other keepers do when they just. You've always got your heart in your mouth with those kind of keepers. They obviously saw Rene Higuita in the 80s and the 90s and thought that was a good idea to do that every game when it bloody isn't. When you are playing with the sweeper keeper dynamic, which I think a lot of clubs are trying to do, which they shouldn't, it's fraught with so much risk, whereby your defence is too high up, so that the risk of the ball in behind, especially if you're playing against an attack who's got a lot of pace to it, and the keeper, if you get your timing just half a second wrong, or you're a bit, do I go unsure, you're out of position, and it's just you just it's a mess. Then it goes wrong. Henderson, yeah, I would have Henderson as well as a goalkeeper, Man United keeper. Henderson in midfield, he's an engine room. People criticise him because he's not the most skilled and he's not the quickest. He will run for 90 minutes if he's fully fit. He will run all day long. He will tackle, he will mark, he will do the dirty stuff. And you need guys like that in your team. Unfortunately, a lot of coaches are going for all this skill stuff and silky, sexy stuff. You need players like Henderson who won't be afraid to leather it into Rose Z, take man and ball, and run all day. Box to box, run all day. Just all day and all night and all day and all night. And he'll run into a brick wall for you. Um, that's something I think a lot of sides could do is with the Jordan Henderson. And people slag him off on social media like he's a donkey, he's not this, he's not that. A, these guys haven't even played Sunday league football or pub football. You need guys who can just run all day, and lead by example with their energy and their fitness and their character guys. You need them to be successful. And I think that's one of the reasons he wasn't fully fit going into the Euros. He didn't have a lot of game time before the Euros, and I think that's one of the reasons why he failed. Um, Again, when you're saying a certain player, he's following the coach's instructions how to play. Um, Performance, yeah, that's on the player, but when the coach is saying you know got to do this, you got to do that. Tactics, especially in attack, I think players are overcoached in attack now. I'd rather see off the cuff where the player just reads the situation, sees where the space is, see who's making the run, see where the defensive players are when the players, and just allow players to express themselves in attack. Defensively is where you want structure. Defensively is where you want to coach a lot. If you overcoach attack, this is what you get with England's football: is they've been overcoached. They've had the skill and the flair coached out. And you can say that a lot about Brazil now as well. They're not as free flowing as they used to be, and South American teams used to be all out attack. Defense was not a thing. Um, I like solidly defensive sides, and defensive effort, but I like it when an attack is completely free flowing and unpredictable. It's more fun to watch. When you overcoach an attack, apart from set plays, when you overcoach attack, that's why I think top flight football is overcoached. Best box to box player, well, of all time or right now? Because that's a difficult one. For me, Kante for Chelsea is the most consistent box to box midfielder. Jordan Henderson, box to box midfielder, very consistent, not outstanding. Um, the In the past, Makalele, Roy Keane, Vieira, Petit. Um, there's a lot of champions in there. Um, Ambrosini for AC Milan when he was fully at his best. Clarence Seedorf, another one, when he was at his best. Having watched a lot of Italian football over the years. Zidane, while he was a brilliantly skillful player, he was also a box-to-box midfielder. He didn't mind tracking back and doing the dirty stuff. So, Zinedine Zidane, there you go. Everyone thinks of all his silky skills and the number he wore on his back. But you asked him as a coach, I need you to do a role. Um, I need you to do this. He would do it. Guti for Real Madrid, goes on very much under the radar. Mendieta back in the day. Bolo Zenden was another one. Dirk Kuyt. Um, I well, I would say all time at the moment. Box to box, I would be N'Golo Kante. English player, I don't know. Calvin Phillips will run all day. I don't think he's fully reached his potential. And Leeds aren't playing well this season, but on his historical form, I've got him into the England setup. Calvin Phillips did have a good 2020, 2021. This season so far, I think, yeah, he's played a lot of games. It's catching up with him. He hasn't had a lot of injuries. He has played a lot. He's looking a little bit fatigued, and Leeds aren't playing the best. Um, how did I become a Rovers supporter? I think was watching football with my dad, and it just happened to be on the telly in 1992. I think, yeah, it just happened on the telly. And we had not long moved back from Germany. It happened on the telly. The Blackburn were playing that day, and they just happened to be on the telly, and we were watching the game. There's a whole host of clubs I could have decided that's going to be my team, but yeah, from a very, very, before they won the Premier League, I just happened to choose them, and I was 3 years old at the time. I mean, I have got links to the Northwest family wise, but yeah, it just happened. And then when I was a little bit older, it transpired that my mum's dad, my other granddad, was a Burnley fan. And I ended up living with him for 16 years. So that was a very interesting. Um, it's just the Lancashire rose. That's why Leeds have the white rose, Blackburn have the red rose. It's to do with the symbols of Yorkshire and Lancashire. So Lancashire's the red rose, and Yorkshire's the white rose. It's historical symbols of both counties, and that's why Blackburn have the red rose. The Wars of the Roses. There you go. Through art at Labora, through work and skill, through work and skill, hard work and skill, work and hard skill and hard work. Good motto to have. Founders of the Football League as well. Um, yeah, and Blackburn is in the heart of Lancashire, and Leeds is in the heart of Yorkshire, and that's why they have Leeds as the white rose and Blackburn as the red rose. It's literally just out of that. And you study the Wars of the Roses, and you'll understand what I mean. The white rose for Yorkshire, and the red rose for Lancashire, and then the Tudor rose is a mix of a white and red rose. So there is historical reasoning behind why they are those logos. A lot of people don't know that. Where are you working now? You don't have to name names. I wasn't. No, I was on a contracted job. Now at the moment, I'm doing the same job for a different council. At the moment, yeah, I'm on by the hours I do. One way England took the red rose. Again, the Tudors were Lancastrian supporters. The House of Lancaster, which is the red rose, and predominantly the Tudor rose is predominantly red with a little bit of white because of Henry Tudor. Henry VII married Elizabeth of York, who were just, I think, second cousins basically. And that's a history video channel. So predominantly the Tudor rose is predominantly red with a bit of white. Um, it's an amalgamation of the two royal houses who were Plantagenets as the main royal house. That's a history video. Don't, because I'll go off on a tangent. I could be here all day. That's how England gets the red rose. Is that because technically the Lancastrians technically win the War of the Roses through the House of Tudor, which is a cadet branch of the House of Lancaster, which is a cadet branch of the House of Plantagenet, which is a history video, and I don't have the energy for that because I would love to do a breakdown of what cadet what they class as cadet branches because yeah it comes down to Edward the Third and then the various branches of the family, and it gets complicated, and it just becomes a bit of a mess. Um, what do I make of Kane as England captain? I prefer look Jordan Henderson for me should be England captain because he's captain of the club and he's won the Premier League, he's won the Champions League. Kane's won sod all at club level apart from top goal scorer for the season. Um, I was surprised when Southgate first got the job. He had multiple players, he had a couple of candidates, and he went for Kane over Henderson. For me, Henderson's more of a leader. He shows by his actions on the field and off the field in the dressing room, and he's guess what won silverware. So I would have had Henderson. That's my personal opinion. You just need that energy guy. He's not the best. Henderson should be going. He gets a lot of criticism on social media from fans going, he's a donkey, he's crap, he can't do this. Trust me, he runs for 90 minutes. He tackles for 90 minutes. He shouts and screams. Kane does nothing. Kane does not no verbal communication from Kane. Speech impediment aside, he doesn't shout and scream at his defenders. He doesn't shout and scream at the free kick taker. Henderson, you can see him barking at players, literally getting in their face. Why is Lloris the Spurs captain, or why isn't Lloris has been Spurs captain before? It depends on manager. Kane has had the armband before. Lloris has had the armband before. Other players since Harry Kane's come into the Tottenham senior squad have had the armband, but Lloris is French captain, World Cup winner. He was stripped of the captaincy after his drink drive conviction. So we'll see if Conte makes him captain again or Conte sticks with Kane as captain. Conte might change the captaincy. Oh, look, I could already tell you before COVID that Henderson should have been England captain. By you can see in replays, you can see by his energy levels, the way he drives his teammates, the way he's screaming and shouting them to move around. Yeah, Henderson is for me the true England captain. It's like when Scotty Parker got that one captaincy for England when Stuart Pearce had that one game as interim manager for England. Scotty Parker, you know, he should have got more caps for England. Another box-to-box midfielder, not as good as some of the others, but he's an underrated player, Scotty Parker. Um, I don't even think Henderson is technically bad. First touch is much more important than Steppos and whatever. No, he knows he's not the most skillful player, but he's got good technique and again work rate, his attitude, his energy levels, his apart from obviously his recent injury problems, his fitness, his desire. And guess what? He's not the most skilled. He doesn't have a big ego. He's a very humble off the field. He's so humble. He's very he knows the privileged position he's in, being a professional football player and playing in the Premier League. So for me, yeah, Henderson far outweighs anyone else as captain. That's who I think should be in captain. How do I become a Canberra supporter? Mal Meninga, you know, Laurie Daly, Ricky Stewart. Yeah, the class of '94, as I call it. Again, like with the Super League war and how that all played out, but growing up, again, like my dad was a sports mad fanatic as well. I think that's where I get a lot of my love of sport from is my old man. Um, and of course, my old man, like my dad, was a serving army sergeant. Well, he was a lance corporal when I was born, but when he retired, he was a regimental sergeant major. But he was sports mad, um, absolutely sports mad. Pissed off his late girlfriend. Obviously, she's still alive. My dad's ex partner, and she got to the point where um, he blew up the TV. So I went to visit him once. I went, "What happened to the telly? Why have you got any telly?" He's like, "Your dad blew it up watching sport." so yeah, Scotty Parker. He does look like a bit of a Bond villain or a bit of a mafioso. He's got that look of he's a bit suave, but I like Scotty Parker. I mean, he's very softly spoken. He's one of those humble individuals who realizes that he had a very privileged position as a professional football player for a long time, and obviously he played for Charlton and Chelsea and Fulham, and he's graced the Premier League, and I think he played for Newcastle as well at one point. He didn't have the most glittering career for like goals and all that, but hard-working player. Um, a poor man's Claude Makelele. There you go. He's like Mark Noble, heart and soul guy. Um, you know, criminally underrated as a player. I think Mark Noble has been criminally underrated. Mark Noble is the reason why he's a West Ham legend, and I'm stunned that he's never had an England cap. Not even one. Um, Not in the modern game, no. When it comes to managers crying, getting emotional, you saw it more in the '60s, '70s, and '80s, especially in the '80s, maybe even a little bit in the early '90s as well. Um, but you don't see it as much in the modern game. You don't see it as much. I think Ranieri, when Leicester won the Premier League, got a bit emotional. I think there's a little. He did wipe away a few tears of joy, um, when they won the Premier League. But oh yeah, the goalkeeping coach. What's his name? He was a top flight. He's a young lad, um, but his predecessor actually got a bit emotional once as well. I remember that. That was a moment. Um, well, Steve Bruce. I mean, Steve Bruce was heartbroken when Hull lost the FA Cup final to Arsenal for a winning position. He looked absolutely shattered, um, absolutely shattered, and he looked. I think he cried a little bit. But Ferguson, when he retired, and Wenger when they coached their last games, Fergie was a 5-5 draw against West Brom, and Arsenal. I forget his last game as Arsenal manager, but I do believe he did cry at that moment when he was presented with his when Ferguson came on the pitch and presented him with an award. Um, there was a few tears there. And Ferguson and Wenger actually now, post managerial, they actually get on, which is really surprising. They actually are good friends off the field now. They weren't when they were managing, but as soon as Ferguson retired, Wenger would regularly phone up Ferguson and go, "How you doing? I'm now the old boy now. I'm now the most longevity manager. I'm stuck in this job. I'm the old boy of management." And as soon as Wenger retired, that for me is the end of an era in management. I don't think a manager comes close to what Wenger and Ferguson did when it came to staying at their club for that period of time ever again. Ever again. I don't think any club manager is in a job as long as those two were. Between them, that's like shit. Fergie was appointed in '86 and retired 2013. Wenger did 22. Yeah, I don't think anyone goes on as long as those guys do. Alan Pardew, I've met him. I'm not a massive fan of Alan Pardew. I'm going to keep my views to Pardew to a minimum. Mark Hughes, Sparky, I like Sparky. As a Blackburn fan, I did enjoy what he did for Blackburn when he was there, and he brought through some players. Mark Hughes, I liked him as a player because he played for us as well for towards the end of his career. He started a riot at Turf Moor. I like Sparky. I remember I've watched him play. I've met him. Mark Hughes. I love watching him as a player and as a manager. I think he got a fair bit of crap at Stoke. I think his time at Stoke went a bit wrong, but overall, I enjoyed watching Mark Hughes on the touchline because in that dressing room he is gonna not stand for players not putting effort in. He may come across in the media as very softly spoken with that soft Welsh accent, but watch him as a player for Chelsea and Man United. There's a reason why he was called Sparky. When he was playing for Blackburn against Burnley, it was the season before we came back up. We're talking like 2000, 2001. And we won a game 5-1 at Turf Moor, but he might have slightly stamped on the Burnley goalkeeper's head. Started a melee in the box, which then led to 450 arrests during and after the game. Might have started a small riot in East Lancashire, South East Lancashire. Might have slightly created some tension, which had been brewing for the previous 20 years. Might have exacerbated said tension at Turf Moor. Steve McClaren, I mean, he did well in Holland. I'm not going to lie, he did well in Holland, but his time at England is where he got called the Wally with the Brolly, and he did well for Middlesbrough as well. I think his time as England manager damaged his reputation. He did well in Holland with AZ Alkmaar, and the Dutch league is not competitive. Ajax all the time. There was a period where Ajax weren't winning the league. It was Feyenoord and AZ Alkmaar were the clubs, swapping titles. He had a good spell at AZ Alkmaar in Dutch football. Hasn't really come back to life. And that happens. Managers like players, their form goes up and down. They peak as a manager, they peak as a player. Steve McClaren, I do have a fair bit of time for Steve McClaren, but his time as England manager was a disaster. Yeah, again, peaks and troughs. I think West Ham fits him like Everton fitted him. The clubs in between didn't fit his style, but Everton fitted him, and West Ham definitely fits him. And the players are buying in, and the players he's got fit his style, and he's happy. That's all he needed, was to be happy, and players are responding. Well, Sunderland's just a mess of a club right now. I mean, they got knocked out of the FA Cup at the weekend. Sunderland's a complete nutcase of a club. Real Sociedad, they're doing well in the Liga right now, so bear that in mind. But Man United was a real bad mistake. A lot of expectation. And look at it, they haven't won the league since Ferguson left, which shows how good a job Ferguson did. And it's very hard to replace someone who was there that long. Same look at Arsenal. Yes, they have won silverware since Wenger's left. And they have been to finals since Wenger left. but again, not as good consistent wise. League position, average league position's less. Um, so, in my opinion, as I say, be careful what you wish for, and it's very hard to replace a dominant figure like a Wenger or a Ferguson. And yeah, I think that was a mistake on the part of David Moyes ending up at Man United. Um, and but it's like Man United before Ferguson. Ron Atkinson was manager, and look how his career's ended up. Um, yeah, Sunderland is a basket case of a club. Really is. And don't get me wrong, I don't think David Moyes is a bad manager. He just had three bad spells at clubs that didn't work out. Um, but at Sunderland, it was a negative. It was a toxic environment anyway. Regardless who was manager there, they would have had the same problems that Moyes faced, and they were in complete and utter mess on and off the field. Um, so he was just thrown to the wolves there. He was thrown to the bus there. The Sociedad job. They're doing really well this season, which is really nice to see. And you know they've had a bit of success in their time as a club. They have won silverware before, so they've got a club with a great history. Um, Overshadowed by the big three, but well, the big two in Madrid and Barcelona. But again, he was coming off the back of a poor. Well, it just shows how good a job he did with the squad he had, because he basically, Moyes inherited a mostly Ferguson squad with a couple of his additions in Fellaini and such. But it was basically a Ferguson squad, and he wanted to play a slightly different style, and they got, it just shows how bad that squad actually was. Um, um, uh, 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 when it comes to Southgate and the FA, who's lined up to? I mean, they're touting like Eddie Howe as a future England manager, so it'd be interesting to see how Eddie Howe does at Newcastle. Considering his record at Bournemouth was pretty good, and the length of time he spent at Bournemouth, it was a long time, about 10 years. Um, and Eddie Howe's young and ambitious. I don't know. Apart from Eddie Howe being groomed, I think, to be the next England manager, and a lot of people touting Eddie Howe to replace Southgate when Southgate goes. What happens if England win the World Cup? What then? But look at Sir Alf Ramsey at England in '73. I mean, he stayed on 7 years after that World Cup when he lingered on, and England were already declining when it all went Pete on. Graham Potter, well, what he's doing with Brighton is a good job. Um, and he's proved it in the Swedish league with taking a no hopers right to the top of the Swedish league. And yeah, the Swedish league. Well, the team he took over in Sweden were like, I think, the third division of Swedish football, the fourth division of Swedish football. Took them to the top flight. Now I think won a couple of domestic cups. So Graham Potter, I think, is another one who's young and dynamic. And I can't see Eddie Howe and Graham Potter being yes men. And that's the FA's problem. They've got to sometimes be a bit okay. Give the reins to these guys because they're young, they're ambitious, and they have actually got a proven track record in making teams better. And yeah, they're both really young, so and they played at lower levels, which is why I think they're better as managers, is they weren't superstar players. So I mean, as I say, interesting to see how Gerrard does at Aston Villa, and how, if Lampard is the candidate that Norwich want, how, if he's announced, how he does. And I think Eddie Howe will do better than Gerrard. I honestly think Eddie Howe at Newcastle will do better than Gerrard. Forget budgets. I think that's what's going to happen. I think Eddie Howe will turn Newcastle around. I think Gerrard will find it a little bit more difficult in a relegation fight to get Aston Villa going. I think Villa will stay up, but I think Gerrard's going to find it a tougher task than Eddie Howe will. Eddie Howe's got extra years of managerial experience, and he took Bournemouth from League Two, on the edge of going out of League Two, all the way to the Premier League, and was there for 10 years. He's got that much extra experience than Gerrard. Surely less than the final winning is failure. The World Cup is a bit different to the Euros. Obviously, you play teams from other continents as well. But yeah, now that we've got the semi-final feeling and the final feeling of the last two tournaments, the next step is required. Semi-final, progress to final. Anything less than getting to the final, winning is I think, yeah, Southgate gone. If we hit the semi-finals, I'll be happy with that with England. I really would. But I think anything less than semi-final appearance, and I think Southgate's gone. Has to be. Has to be gone. Um, no, PSG were the richest second division club ever because they were bought when they were in the French second tier by the current ownership. So not necessarily, but now they are. Yes. How am I doing? I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Thank you very much. I'm very interested to see the drawn pathway for the World Cup and people get ready to call. Um, well, I look. Um, we've got these two games. I'm expecting 2 wins. Anything less than 2 wins is not good enough. Albania aren't a bad side. They're a solid outfit, well drilled. They're physically fit, so they can charge around for 90 minutes. It's whether we can just use superior quality and the higher level of players that we. No, PSG have been relegated. They did play in the League Two in France. PSG have been relegated. They have spent several seasons outside the top flight in France. They have. The final buyout happened when they were, but there was already Qatari investment when they were in the second tier of French football. Monaco have also played outside the French top flight as well. I've done a history video on PSG. Trust me, you can't fool me. I know the history of PSG. Yes, they didn't win their first season. Montpellier, I remember when Montpellier won their league title. They had a crap Champions League campaign the following season, though. Oh, that was terrible. Bordeaux, I think, also won the French league as well. I am waiting for like the pressure to come from the media. I am waiting for that. They do it every tournament, I think, but I just don't think we have got. I think the best England squad I think that ever was assembled in my lifetime was the '98 squad. That's my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion. The '98 World Cup squad was the best squad we'd assembled because it had a lot of experienced players in it and youth players like young Michael Owen, who was 18, but they also had a lot of experienced players in that squad. That's something that we are sorely lacking right now. And I, to be fair, I'm not a big fan of Southgate either. And I mean, looking at Albania are not an easy side to play against. We know they're going to be pretty defensive, trying to hit us on the counter attack. But San Marino, anything less than an 8-0 is not good enough for me. Maybe even double figures. That's my personal opinion on that one. 2 wins. Anything less than 2 wins, not happy, not good enough. Albania, if we get a draw, I won't be overly disappointed, but I'm expecting a win. 2-0. I'll be happy with the 2-0 as long as we play well. And if Albania really play out of their skins and make it a real interesting game, then I could be happy with a score draw. But I will not be happy if we don't score against Albania. I'll be even more disappointed if we don't pump San Marino. When I say pump, I mean literally slaughter them. But I can see a lot of Southgate making a lot of squad changes to the San Marino game and throwing in a lot of squad players and disrupting the flow. And I just don't put out your strongest lineup and have the squad changes on the bench. If a player's got a little niggling injury, okay, don't risk him in a game like that because the San Marino players are going to hack you down. They're going to be physical and they're going to try and stick in the game as long as possible. And yes, the 7-1, I remember watching that. Gordon Taylor as manager. Graham Taylor as manager, sorry. And we conceded after like 13 seconds. And that was the match that cost him his job. And we didn't qualify for the World Cup in 1994, but we had already fouled up qualification by that point. And that was our biggest win as well. Was also the only time we've ever conceded a goal against San Marino, which was the highlight of that day. But I'm expecting 2 wins. Anything less than that is not good enough. But historically against Albania, we haven't blown them off the park. It's not as if we've battered them 6, 7, 8-0. And No, they're not pushovers. They played at tournament. They play tournament football. Some of their best players do play at a higher level. They're not. They're at the Euros recently, I think, or they were at the previous Euros. So they've got some tournament experience in there. Um, they are a solid outfit. They're a well drilled outfit. Um, so they're not going to be pushovers. You know, they're going to be aggressive defensively. Then yeah, I think, and there's going to be a lot of Albanian fans in the crowd at Wembley because there's a big Albanian community over here. So they're going to have a fair bit of support tomorrow night as well. So it won't be like a complete sea of white for England. There's going to be a fair bit of support for the Albanians at Wembley because there's a large Albanian community in the southeast, especially in London. I've got some Albanian friends who live in London. Um, so yeah, they're going to be real difficult players. Um, and yeah, so I can't. It won't be an easy game. And that again is we haven't blown them off the park every time we played them. I think the first time we played, I think we won 2-0 or 3-1 or something. It was for the qualifiers for the World Cup in 2002. So it was 2001, so 20 years ago. It was the first time we ever played Albania in internationals. Um, so we played them a fair bit since then. I think we played them in qualifying. I think 3 qualifying campaigns. So, and our record against them isn't terrible. I think we've won every game we played against them, but we haven't dominated them as much as you expect on paper. And matches aren't won on paper. If we think we won the game on paper, we could lose. And there is a potential banana skin there. But if we play poorly and Albania play really well, then I'm disappointed. If Albania and us both play poorly and it's a scrappy affair, that happens in games. But with the talent we have disposable, you know, English-based Albanians, no. Uh, well, there is a hooligan element to the Balkan football, so but there's a big Albanian community over here. They're a very proud community. There's a big Kosovan community over here as well. Um, and I've, you know, I, Albania aren't minnows. San Marino are. I think if we don't put tempo on San Marino, it's embarrassing. And no offense to San Marino, because there's only I think 1 or 2 full professionals in their squads. They're playing for pride and they're playing for the love of the game. And to represent your country, it doesn't matter how good, how good you are. Um, it's a great honour, and I think a lot of the top ranked sides and the more professional leagues they're very privileged. It's a privilege, not a right. And I think a lot of people forget. A lot of players forget that. And quite literally, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, investment bankers, plumbers, bricklayers. It's basically like an FA Cup third round tie with a non-league side as someone made it to the third round. And this is like the Premier League champions playing a team from the Isthmian division. And this is what this yeah. I mean, you have to respect the effort they keep putting in, knowing they're going to lose every game. Um, and I just want to see fast-paced attacking football because there's going to be a lot of free kicks. So set plays, we could actually practice our set plays because San Marino are going to give away a lot of free kicks because there're going to be a lot of fouls in there. Um, so this is an opportunity, the San Marino game, to work on set plays and things off the training ground. It really is. So that's something that I sometimes like is when you're playing these mismatched games like the FA Cup, it's an opportunity to practice set plays because you're going to have a lot of free kicks. If we're caught offside against San Marino, I am going to be ripping my hair out because San Marino will not be defending high up the pitch. Let's be honest on that. They are going to be sitting deep. So if we're caught offside, that's a joke. Shouldn't happen. But we can definitely practice the set plays, even from corners, and mix things up a little bit in that sense. That's a good thing. But pace on the ball, movement off the ball, and none of this slow pace possession football. We don't want that. We want to see combinations like young players learning those combinations with squad mates. Pass and move quick, pass and move quick. Little ball over the top, little ball down the touchline. Move them around because after like 20 minutes, they will be knackered. They will be blowing hard. Um, yeah, a forklift driver. You got to have a forklift driver in there. You got to have a tray. You got to have like an industrial worker, like a welder or something. Um, Ask the gaffer if he could go off and play. Um, yeah, I mean, look, I don't. I think Kane may not. I mean, Kane hasn't. I don't think he's fully fit. I don't think he was fully fit at the Euros. He definitely wasn't fully fit to start the season. And Tottenham's record with him in the size pool this season, beating Germany 5-1 in Munich at the old Olympic Stadium back on September 2001, and beating Scotland 2-0 in the Euro 96, beating Holland 4-1 in Euro 96, and Stuart Pearce in that penalty shootout in Euro 96 against Spain. Um, I'm surprised Kane he is starting to get a lot of injuries. But this is where I understand, like players getting paid as they are, getting well compensated for their services because some playing careers are over before you. I mean, Dean Ashton was done at 25 um, as a player. Uh, he's now gone into doing some radio work for BBC Kent or BBC Essex, I think, because he's an ex-West Ham player and covering West Ham games. He has appeared on as a pundit before. He's done a bit of media work. But Dean Ashton was done quite young. I remember that. I know we've also beaten Germany 1-0 at the Euros at Charleroi in Euro 2000. Alan Shearer scored the goal, of course. Um, Harry Kane, I mean, he started out as a winger, ironically. He wasn't an out centre forward. But yeah, Harry Kane, he doesn't strike me as a leader on and off the field. Um, Definitely not on the field, not a leader. But he didn't look right in the Euros in the summer at all. He looked completely out of just not there. But we don't know. He just obviously wants to agitate for a move. Kevin De Bruyne, he's had a lot of injuries as well, and he's a bit younger, and that's really surprising that if his body's packed in. Um, but again, we're speculating. We are speculating. But yeah, like I don't think. Hmm, is Harry Kane a bad player? No. Is he injury prone? Yes. I'm going fitness. I'm going fitness. I think fitness is a massive problem with Harry Kane. He's been having ankle issues now since the 2016 season, where Tottenham failed to win the Premier League when Leicester won the Premier League. He's been having issues with his ankles for quite some time, recurring ankle injuries, recurring ankle injuries. Um, I don't think he's had any surgery on any of those injuries though. That'll be an interesting one if he decides to have ankle surgery. That may fix the problem and a bit of rehab. So I'd be interested to see what Conte does in January, whether he finds a buyer for Kane and how he changes the style of play for Tottenham. Because if Harry Kane is going to constantly be injury prone, that's a big contract that Tottenham are paying him, and he's missed a lot of games. Um, but he does come too deep sometimes because he wants to be involved. Because he originally started out as a winger. His first appearance for Tottenham, he was under Tim Sherwood, and he played him on the wing, and he was very, very effective playing on that last shoulder. He's lost a lot of pace. Um, he has actually noticeably lost pace in recent years, and that's something I've noticed. So um, he's looking less mobile than what he was, and yeah, he's played a lot of football in the last 10 years, like 9, 10 years. He has been around quite some time now. He is 28, 29. He's been around a while since he burst onto the scene. Um, but I, I just don't think he's fully fit. I really don't think he's 100% fit. I don't think he's been 100% fit for a while, and that's the problem with professional sport now. You're constantly playing with niggling injuries, and I think the COVID shutdown might have helped Harry Kane a little bit. Imagine if we didn't have the COVID shutdown and COVID wasn't a thing. I think he would be worse. Um, but Southgate, Kane's his man. That's the thing. I don't think Harry Kane's the whole problem. I think it's it's our strengths are quick pace counter attack. I mean, with that, Harry Kane can drop that a little bit deeper because players are then running on behind. Because when you haven't got players running on behind, he becomes slow. It exacerbates the lack of pace that Harry Kane has and his lack of mobility. If we're playing at a faster pace, he can get away with that because he can then just drift into positions and make him, and then other players create space for him. But when the pace of the game is slow, it exacerbates what is clearly an unfit player. Um, and that is a glaring issue. Is that he's not as mobile as he was 5, 6 seasons ago. It is noticeable that he's lost a lot of pace, and he's only in his late 20s. You normally see that in your early 30s, so there is obviously concerns there. But that's when you experiment with lineups and with players. That's when you experiment. Is when you know the opposition you're playing against, you are going to beat them, which is a dangerous mindset to have. Oh, we're going to beat this team because the FA Cup of the weekend proved that that's not the case. Expecting to win is normally when you expect to win, you generally fail. Doesn't always work, but I would say that Harry Kane, there's something not right with him, and I do believe, a little bit of that is the off-field dramas with wanting to leave and being unsettled. That can have a mental. If you're having like a bit of mental stress, that can actually affect you physically. But I also believe he's not 100% and hasn't been 100% for quite some time. Now, is that Tottenham's training methods exacerbating any niggles he's got? Is it has he just has his have his do his ankles need surgery? Does he need a prolonged period of recovery and rest away from the game for like 6 months? Just write him off for the season. Put McCartan will rest him up and get your health and fitness back as best as possible. Is it training methods? Is it the opposition just kicking lumps out of him? That's for me an interesting one, but he didn't look great. I mean, he scored goals at the Euros, yes, and that's Tottenham football. You've made it at the top level, you've qualified by right, bosh, but he looked hopeless against Scotland. And again, you expect both sides to, regardless of form going into that tournament, both sides go hammer and tongs. Even Ricky Lambert scored against Scotland, and Ricky Lambert was known not to be a very mobile player. Ricky Lambert never had pace, ever. But he was big, he was physical, and he could make his own space. Ricky Lambert scored against Scotland. And both sides weren't doing great at the time in comparative terms. I remember Ricky Lambert scoring against Scotland. The pub went nuts. That was a fairy tale story of a guy who was told he would never make it as a professional. And he did. Um, I personally don't think Harry Kane is 100%. I think he's playing with a niggling injury, which is fine if you can manage that. But I don't think his body is. I think his body it needs prolonged rest. He's played a lot of football. And every time it's always an ankle. It's always an ankle. It's not muscular, which is a good thing. It's not knees, which is a good thing because knees, when your knees go, it's his ankles, and that affects your ability to turn, start your runs. And but Southgate said he's the captain. That I think was the mistake, making Kane captain over Jordan Henderson. But we'll see what happens tomorrow night. We'll see what happens against San Marino. I don't think he play. I think he's resting for San Marino, and some of the young players and new combinations get given game time. But yeah, I'm not sold on Harry Kane. When he first burst on the scene, I had a lot of positive vibes about him. He was mobile. He was a lot quicker. But he needs a full time. He works better in a two rather than a three. But when he first burst on the scene, Jermaine Defoe was still at Tottenham, so you had that nimble little player who could play off him. He doesn't have that now because we play with three up front, which does not suit Kane at all. Uh, I haven't watched a lot of club. I mean, the only club football I've watched this season is the FA Cup. Um, and so therefore I'm a little bit limited in highlights I've seen. But from watching the Euros, Kane did not look right. Kane did not look right. And his form going into the Euros was shocking as well with Spurs. They just stopped playing. Mentally, he's not there. Like he's clocked out. He wants to leave. He's made his decision up. Um, so mental. If you've got mental fatigue, that does affect you physically. When you're suffering with stress and a tough decision and you're not happy, uh, I think you need surgery and about 6 months recovery, like proper long term physio recovery, wrap and cotton wool. Spurs play better without him as well. He's obviously been carrying niggles for a while. They're building up. It's getting to the point where he's going to need not a whole season signed off, but a period of time where he's allowed to recover, and then he can be useful for the World Cup. That makes sense. I would say shut him down. Yeah, I just don't think he's fully fit. I think he's carrying injuries, and club and country are suppressing the release, saying no, he's not on the treatment table. But I think he's spending a lot of time off. It's like Ledley King could only play 1 in 3 games. He couldn't train all the time. Eventually, he had to stop training and just play 1 in 3 games. And Ledley King was a hard-working defensive player. He really put a shift in for Spurs. Last captain to lift silverware for Spurs as well, Ledley King. And by the end, his knees were destroyed. They got so bad it didn't matter how many surgeries he had. He decided enough's enough. I've got to step aside and go into a support coaching role with Spurs, which I think he has, and club ambassador role. Um, but again, we're speculating. But he has had ankle problems. They are getting more and more persistent. I think surgery is the answer and a lengthy recovery process. Um, and then change your style of play. Um, he has to change his style of play. And if you are going to have Kane in the side, you need two up front rather than three, which means you have to adapt your style of play as a team if you want to have him continuing in the side, because he needs that quick player running off his shoulder, which is at Tottenham when he had Jermaine Defoe or Son. Right now, it works when they play as a two up front. It doesn't work when they play a three up front. I'm not anti Kane. I just don't think the system we have in place suits Kane's style. He works better in a strike partnership rather than a three. And when the pace of the game slows down, he is useless. And that's just his style of play. It just doesn't work. You need quick style play in order to get Kane the space. Plus, defenders have worked out he's not the quickest. He won't outrun players. Jamie Vardy, however, is the complete opposite. Even at his age, he is still on the shoulder, and he's still getting in behind, and he still loves the ball over the top. And Jamie Vardy hasn't lost that pace because Jamie Vardy is super fit. And when he does have injuries, he when he's not 100%, Brendan Rodgers looks after him. Ranieri looked after him. Hence why, for me, I was surprised when he announced his international retirement. But Southgate was like, "No, I'm going with young players. I'm going with Harry Kane as my top striker." When actually Jamie Vardy is just fitter and can play 90 minutes constantly, and he works the high press and the high paced game. He loves that high paced counter attack football. It suits his style. Harry Kane doesn't suit the England style. If Harry Kane played for a different country with a different with a different style, where you had that sole big striker up front, or two strikers with a slightly more mobile striker and the big lump who can hold the ball up like Hungary do with Salajai, Shalai, we wouldn't be having the conversation. But he fits the team. He fits the style of play, the physical style of play, and bullying defenders. But Harry Kane doesn't even bully defenders anymore. Um, but Vardy was like, well, Southgate doesn't have any faith in me, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, he's won FA Cup, Charity Shield, and Premier League. And that's all you need to know, really, in my opinion. I think Jamie Vardy was done a dirty by Southgate. That's where I sort of went Southgate doing the wrong thing here. You need that experienced leader and experienced player, that veteran player who's played, in not just in the Premier League but in all leagues, played in the non-league as well. Who knows what it's like to live in the real world? Because Jamie Vardy's actually had a real job. He was a part-time player, playing for Fleetwood in the non-league at one point, and he did the hard way. And he's look at him now. He's still banging in the goals. He's still on that last shoulder. He's still got the pace. He's like Marcus Stewart. He's a modern day Marcus Stewart, just with a bit more pace and a bit more physicality about him and a bit more aggression. Um, Another player that people forget about is Marcus Stewart, famous for his days at Ipswich, and he carried on playing late, almost till he was 40. I don't think Harry Kane makes it past 33 as a player. I think Harry Kane's done in his early 30s if he's this injury prone. And then that comes down to the club and Spurs, how they manage players who are not fully fit, manage rehabilitation, manage injuries, and then you have to start asking questions of the medical team at Tottenham and the coaching style, the training methods. Conte will change that. Conte will change that, and he will change the culture. Um, you know, behind the scenes, in my opinion, I think Conte may be what Spurs need, and we may see Harry Kane definitely on the out if this Conte, like Diego Costa, like he had a few injuries, got him effective again, got Diego Costa effective again. So, in my opinion, I think Conte will be well. Yeah, Kane, Poch, and Sherwood, Pochettino, and Mourinho have all been sacked since Kane's broken through. So that tells you a story in itself. Every manager that's played Harry Kane at club level has got the sack. So there's a bit of correlation there, and yeah, Tottenham have got to a couple of League Cup finals and not even got the League Cup to their name. So since Harry Kane's been playing, so again, there's something to that. That Champions League final was the worst Champions League final I've ever seen. Um, and a lot of Tottenham players, there's a lot of injuries. You look at the players who played for Spurs in recent years. So Eric Dyer, Dele Alli, Harry Kane. Trippier had a lot of injuries when he was playing for Spurs. Danny Rose had a lot of injuries playing for Spurs. They go to other clubs and they're less injury prone. So I do believe there is something in the water at Spurs where players, same with Arsenal. Arsenal and Tottenham have both been decimated by injury over the recent seasons. And you have to start asking questions of the training methods and the medical team. You have to start asking questions about rehabilitation of players. Dele Alli, I mean, look, there's no doubt that he is not fulfilled his potential and his career is tapered and it's not where it should be. Um, in Liverpool's case, there's a lot of injuries on the field that are freak. In Liverpool's case, with players getting injured during games, but what we're seeing with Spurs is it's not just the one-off injuries for like that nasty and shocking. Like Virgil van Dijk, people go, "Oh, is he the best defender? Is he not?" Pickford, when he took him out, yeah, that is how Pickford didn't get a red and a ban for that is completely beyond me. That young lad who had an injury, I think it was against Leeds earlier in the season, horrific injury. Um, Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's had a few muscular injuries, and that's down to sometimes genetics and muscle mass and muscle strength. Um, we've seen it in other sports as well, like Luke Shaw. Um, he started Harvey. That's the one. Harvey. Luke Shaw started to get his fitness right, and he's starting. He's had a bit of a wobbly start to the season, but Luke Shaw last year got his fitness right, worked with Solskjaer, breath of fresh air, new manager, new ideas, got his fitness right, got back into the squad, played well last season, gets in the England squad, plays well for England as well. One of the best players in the tournament this season is not working now, but he's staying fit, and that's something that Lucia will struggle with throughout his career at Man United. Southampton, no injury problems. So again, there's this correlation um, with certain clubs having a worse injury toll than others. Now, in Liverpool's case, players get injured in games. They've had a rotten batch of luck with players getting hurt in game for years. For whatever reason, players getting hurt, injured in game has plagued Liverpool for a long time. Players getting little niggles in training is not Liverpool's problem. It's those injuries in game. It happens. It's contact sport. With with Spurs and Arsenal, Jesus Christ, it, they are plagued by the players getting injured, plagued in training, aggravating injuries, constantly being recurring injuries. So it's the same injury over and over again. Jack Wilshere is a prime example. He goes to other clubs, stays fitter for longer. Now, and that's where you have to start looking at the medical side of things, the medical teams. The medics, the team doctor, their rehabilitation process, how much time they're given to get Russian back. Other clubs seem to have a better track record with players being out injured. Injuries happen. Some players are very, very lucky they don't have many injuries. Oh God, Leeds this season are decimated, absolutely decimated. Is it the style of football they play? Is it their training techniques? Again, you have to ask questions when it's certain clubs. When it's not match injuries, it's injuries in training or players coming back from an injury and getting injured again and aggravating an injury and recovery time. Are they being pushed too hard in training so their bodies break down in game? You know, it's definitely a question mark. It definitely is, and it's something that needs to be looked at. Um, you know, are some of these clubs trying to rush players back in the rehabilitation process too quickly? You know, and some clubs have been hammered by injury, with other clubs seem to get away with not a lot of players out injured. Um, when players are out injured, they're given a slightly longer recovery time. They're not ahead of schedule. They're more careful, and therefore players don't have recurring injuries when they come back. But there's certain clubs, Spurs, Arsenal, United, Liverpool, a lot of the injuries have happened on the field and they're quite serious. But Trent Alexander-Arnold's had a few little niggles. But again, he plays at a high pace and he's a high energy player. And so, is it his style of play? Are the pitches now too good? Are the pitches too quick now? As called flat tracks is the term that rugby league will use, where it's a fast-paced playing surface. I think that's another thing. Yeah, Harry Maguire started to pick up injuries as well, which he didn't have before at Leicester and Hull. He was pretty much injury-free at those clubs. Suddenly, he goes to United, injury. He's picking up more injuries. And so, yeah, there's more question marks. So that's some interesting topics, interesting thread we're going on now with certain teams having more injuries than others and being the injury curse. Arsenal have had it for years. Spurs have had it for years. And then you start to look at the medical setup of the team, like the physios and the doctors. That's when you have to start asking questions. If you've changed manager, so playing style, training style is different, but the same number of players per season, and it's the same injuries regularly per season, and it's the same players regularly. Then you have to start asking questions of the medical setup, physios and such. Yeah, Maguire never really had injury problems at his previous club, so then you have to start asking questions. But it's just sometimes it's the first injury, and then it's like knees, ankles, and muscular injuries can become recurrent and problematic, and it's about managing them. Again, Ledley King with his knees, it got to the point where you could only train 1 day in 3 and play 1 in 3 games. We'd have to have a 3-day rest. It got to that point. If you had 3 games in 7 days, you could only play 1 of them. And so, imagine if Ledley King had stayed fit the entire time, how many more games he would have played for Tottenham. That's stunning with Ledley King, how many games he actually missed because he was managing his knee condition, not because he was officially out injured and on the injured list. It was just amazing that at points he just couldn't train, so they could play him at the weekend. And if he was training, they couldn't play him at the weekend, or they couldn't play him in the midweek. But it depend on the strength of opposition. Oh, it's a cup game. Do we risk him? It's a group stage, and whatever European competition, or it's a League Cup game. We'll rest him for that because it's midweek. And it got to the point with Ledley King as a prime example that he just one game in three he was able to play, and one training session in three he was able to play because if he played, he would have to have 3 days off. He wasn't able to train. If he trained, he would have to have 3 days off and would miss, let's say, the midweek game. The Christmas period, you'll be lucky if you got him once. De Bruyne obviously had that nasty facial injury at the Euros. He's had knee and ankle problems that are quite nasty. He got back. He was back a lot quicker from his I think, last season when he went down injured and I thought, oh, that's Man City done. He was back 2 months ahead of schedule, but he didn't look right at the Euros, and then he got that nasty facial injury where he had the fractured eye socket, which was nasty, wasn't pleasant, and those injuries are freak injuries. There's no mistakes there. But again, his knees and ankles, they were nasty ones, and he was ahead of schedule. Which when you're pushing a player back like that, doesn't matter if he's a key component or he's a squad player. That's why I start asking questions about player welfare long term. That's where okay, player welfare. If it's your eye, we have a workplace injury, we're covered by workplace insurance. Statutory sick. They can't sack you if you get injured because they risk getting taken to tribunal, all that kind of stuff. Uh, you know, Doctors will be like, okay, your physio, you're progressing better than we expected, but we'll keep with the program until we deem you fit enough to go or as best. I'm having to manage my shoulders, my back, my knees. I've been told that my shoulder will never get any better than what it is now at a push, and it's got worse. I did 6 months of physio solid. I could barely move my arm at one point with my left shoulder, and I was told when I finished that batch of physio, that's as good as it's going to get without us having to completely reconstruct your shoulder. And I was 28, 29 at the time. I'm now pushing 32. So about 4 years ago, I had to have a whole batch of lengthy physio, and I was in excruciating agony at the time. My nerve, and now I'm basically it's not as good as it once was after physio. It's not going to get any better. Even with physio, still be weaker than what I was before physio, the last batch. So my shoulder's only going to get worse long term. I will need to have shoulder surgery, and I've been postponing going down that route for as long as possible. And now with COVID, I'll be waiting years. So by the time I'm 40, my left shoulder is completely gone. It's had it. So I won't be able to go back to playing rugby again or five-a-side football again. Because if I do my shoulder and I'm done, I'm in serious trouble. And that's something I just cannot risk. So imagine what it's like for a professional player. Yes, they're paid great money, but they know why they're paid such good money. And fairly so, but maybe a bit too much. But we're talking about Harry Kane. He's in his late 20s. Oh, his career's done. He's on the decline. He's declining earlier than he should be because Jamie Vardy's proving. Jamie Vardy's had some injuries in there. Let's not forget. Jamie Vardy's proving that you can still go into your mid-30s. Marcus Stewart proved he'd go to nearly 40 when he retired. Sheringham went to his early 40s. So the position that Harry Kane plays, other players who have played during his career, who are currently still playing, who are a bit older than him, have proven. I mean, Sheringham played until I think he was 44. I think Sheringham was still playing when Harry Kane debuted. Now, they're different leagues, mind, so it's a different pace and different style of play. Sheringham finished his career with Millwall, and I think he was 44, 45 when he decided enough's enough. Buffon's still playing, and he's pushing 42, 43. Different position, but what I'm getting at is other players have had injuries, and Buffon's had injuries, which at times people have gone, that's his career done. He's a goalkeeper. A hand or wrist injury can be career threatening when he was in his 20s. And he missed Euro 2000 because he did his hand in, so Toldo was the starting goalkeeper. And Toldo was a brilliant keeper as well. Fontana, who used to play for Lazio, played till he was 43. I seem to remember. He's in his 50s now. Dino Zoff played till he was in his 40s, and that's back when medical care and physio care is completely different to what it is now. It's so far advanced to what it was in the 70s and 80s. Dino Zoff played professionally for 20, was it 3 years? Dino Zoff played for. He was also losing his eyesight. He had eye problems. He started developing cataracts by his late 30s. So some players, yeah, Dino Zoff was lucky he didn't have many major injuries. Remember that if you want to go to the history books. But Buffon has had hand and wrist injuries and shoulder injuries before. He's still playing. His position as goalkeeper, you need your hands, you need your arms, and your neck and your shoulder because he's a goalkeeper. Vardy's still going. He's had a few niggly little injuries in his time. He's not been completely injury free. Marcus Stewart played till he was pushing 40. Sheringham played till his mid 40s. So yeah, I think. Oh God, no, because you've got your AHL affiliate. The NHL cannot afford any games to be cancelled because of the Olympics, and the collective bargaining agreement stated they would go to the Olympics. They have until I think January the 12th to confirm that they are going to pull out. And so, in that opinion, I mean, the San Jose Sharks had 7 players out and got through it at one time. I think 9 at one point earlier in the season, beginning of October. So I can see that game still going ahead. There's been no announcement that I can think of saying it's not. Just going to double check the Ottawa Senators and see if that game has been delayed. I can't see the NHL. They're going to try and get it done simply because with the Olympics, there's not enough flexibility in the schedule to play games. We saw it a few years ago with Florida and Boston having a couple of games postponed back to backs because of snow in New England, and they played them right at the end of the season, and that meant Florida just missed out on the playoffs a couple of years back. So, but they had flexibility to go, we'll play these 2 games last, get them in. But we saw with like Vancouver and then Dallas last season when they had massive COVID outbreaks that they just shoved them in, shoved games in, got every game played, but it just got to the point where physically players were coming down injured. Let's have a look at the Ottawa Senators. Let's see what's coming up with the news on the Ottawa Senators. Yeah, it's expected to go ahead. Brown is the latest player. Let's have a look. So I'm going with the Ottawa Sun because that's the local broadsheet newspaper. Show is expected to go ahead. This is yesterday. This is today, 3 hours ago. So this is literally breaking news for them. And there's a lot of talk in the sense that they should postpone. They have to. The NHL will say your AHL affiliate. I forget who the NHL affiliate is. The AHL for and the ECHL affiliates are for the Senators, but they've got players on 2-way contracts who they can call up. Right. Okay. Let's have a look. Battling. Let's have. This is what the Ottawa Sun are reporting. This is literally in the last 3 hours. So this is breaking news. The Ottawa Senators roster took another hit yesterday, and the concern is that the virus may not be done making its way through the dressing room. And if they're not COVID vaccinated, they can't play in Canada. So bear that in mind. That's the second time this week that they've cancelled their skate. So they didn't have a training session yesterday. The Canadian Tire Centre was shut down. As it stands, the Senators are scheduled to play the Kings tonight. Josh Brown was the 6th player placed on the protocol yesterday. So if any more have been added, that's not on this breaking news. That's unofficially, possibly. That's 6. That's less than what the San Jose Sharks did. I can't see any of the Atlanta players being able to get up there personally, although they might, but that'd be really late to get them called up to cover the AHL players who've had to be called up. Judging by the way COVID is they're expecting more names to be added today. The NHL Deputy Bill Daly, NHL Deputy Commissioner, told the paper the league is monitoring the situation, hasn't reissued any games yet, and any team that has been hit has been bringing brought in players on two-way contracts from their AHL affiliates. We would like to avoid rescheduling games if at all possible. The Kings will probably already be in Canada now. Well, they already are because they're on a road trip. They're already in Ontario. So the reality is the numbers are getting so high the NHL may be left with no other choice. If it hits double digits, then it'll be interesting. They've got flexibility because the AHL only play normally 3 games a week, mostly on weekends, so they could possibly get away with it. It's believed there's talk of trying to reschedule Tuesday's game with the Boston Bruins with Ottawa caseloads growing, but they went ahead. They were able to bring up Sokolov, Brandstrom, and Saborin. Brown has joined Watson, the other Connor Brown, Gambrell, Holden, and Mete. Jack Capuano, the former Islanders head coach, has also joined the list. If you're in the protocols with 10 days, 2 straight negative PCR tests. Let's have a look. As a result of this outbreak, testing, all staff, right. Well, the NHLPA and the NHL agreed to reduce testing. Also, in Canada, all players have to be fully vaccinated if they want to play. So hence why Tyler Bertuzzi hasn't been able to play any games in Canada because he refuses to get vaccinated, which I think is just ridiculous. Considering that his mother works in education, that is ridiculous. The Senators are the latest team. The Penguins, the Sharks, the Blues, and the Blackhawks have all gone through this. The Sharks had 7 players in protocols over last week, and they still actually managed to win games. So the league wants to play a 2-game season on schedule. The Olympics in February. It's a compressed schedule, so the Senators outbreak started 4 hours after the game returned from a 3-game trip from Dallas, Chicago, and St. Paul, Minnesota. So Chicago have had an outbreak as well. So there you go. Pierre Dorian doesn't address the players often, but he did make a point of going to the dressing room to speak to the group before the Senators went on the trip. He told them the best way was to proceed with caution and stay with teammates and away from public areas. They're trying to put them back in a bubble, yeah. So the fact that more players have been added, I'm going to see if any other. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back here. TSN are reporting stuff. I'm having a look. There's nothing else breaking right now. So the fact that 2 more have just got added to it, they could be close contacts. Weird. I don't know how the Canadian health system and federal and provincial law in Canada works. So Josh Brown. When was this uploaded? This is yesterday, so yeah, this is out of date now. This article, so I can only get away with so much. See what else. So I'm just going to set up this page on TSN because I prefer TSN over Sportsnet by a long way. Okay, yeah, that's now broken on TSN. Murray and Formanton. 3 hours ago, the plans to go ahead as scheduled. The fact that 2 more players have been added, there's a problem. Okay, Darren Driga, however, again, I really respect his reporting. While the team is awaiting the latest round of test results, they plan to move forward against the Kings tonight. The medical officers from the NHL. Go away! I don't want to have a. That's no, I don't want that because I'll get a copyright. Shut up, stupid. While the team is awaiting the latest round test results, medical officers from the NHL and NHLPA are monitoring. Josh Brown was put in yesterday. Victor Mete, Connor Brown, Dylan Gambrell, Nick Holden, Austin Watson. Wow. And there's more coming out about the Blackhawk situation with Aldrich. So yeah, now the fact that right now they've got a live stream with Pierre LeBron. I like it. Da, 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 da. Murray and Formenton. Let's see, this is 2 hours ago. Um, that that so recalled Agnosio, Hetherington, and Thompson. Da, 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 da. It's still expected to go ahead, and that's the latest news. So yes, Fermenton and Murray added to that. The fact that San Jose went ahead with 7 players in protocols, Chicago and St. Louis have also had games go ahead with players in protocols, says to me that the NHL they basically said, look, that with the affected schedule with the Olympics, I'm surprised that this Winter Olympics is going ahead this year. Brilliant. But they haven't got the flexibility they would have had in a normal season. So, and we have seen games postponed because of poor outside weather conditions. Yeah, but the AHL play less games. You occasionally get me, most games play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, in that regard, they're on 2-way contracts. They're training all the time. They're professional athletes. They regularly have contested full contact training sessions. So, in my opinion, that shouldn't be a problem. San Jose proved it wasn't a problem. St. Louis have proved it hasn't been a problem. Chicago is just a basket case of it right now. But it is concerning, and I could see the Bruins going into protocols as well, because they would have been in close contact with these players. So I could see this becoming more of an issue for the league, and we may see stricter protocols in place, and we'll see what happens. I think they've got a bit lax on the protocols. They should have stuck with stricter protocols than what they've got with daily testing, rather than reducing the testing regimen. But that was up to the NHL, and the NHLPA came to an agreement. They relaxed the testing regime. They relaxed the bubble conditions. To play in Canada, you've got to be vaccinated. So all the Canadian teams are 100% vaccinated. It's only in the US that there are a handful of players who play for US teams who aren't vaccinated. Tyler Bertuzzi being the prime example. So he misses out on all Canadian games for the Detroit Red Wings. He's a key part of the Red Wings. And the games he hasn't played, the Red Wings have struggled in. So it'll be an interesting one going forward. What the NHL and NHLPA decide to do if more players come down. At the moment, the plans to go ahead. If more players come down and test positive, and those results are released, then it changes the situation completely. But Belleville, well, they're nearby. I mean, do you start calling up players from the ECHL from Atlanta, fly them in? They won't make it in time. They won't make it in time unless they're on a road trip and they're in Canada. They won't make it in time. On the northeast, they won't make it in time from Atlanta. It's like a 5-6 hour flight. Won't make it in time. So Central, but then again, the Jets play in the Central, and so the Coyotes. So I'm a bit biased there. I think the Pacific is the weakest division. I think the Central is possibly the toughest division to get out of. There's 6, in my opinion, Stanley Cup finalists in the Central Division right now. Chicago and Arizona are basket cases right now, a complete messes. Arizona's by design. They're deliberately doing a rebuild and want to get as many draft picks as possible. Chicago's just a mess. But the other 6 teams in the Central, you can see them playing in the Stanley Cup final. Whether they win the Stanley Cup final or not is another thing. But for me, the Central is the toughest division. The Pacific's the weakest. So the Western Conference has got the strongest and weakest divisions, in my opinion, going forward. The Central. So, I mean, with Colorado having a poor start as well, that really opens up the Central. St. Louis are playing really well. The Jets are playing really well, thankfully. And a slow start, but we're doing quite well. Minnesota are a surprise package. You Dallas, good and hot and cold. But yeah, it's a difficult one because the California teams are playing better than expected, and Seattle are pretty solid. And you've got Vegas in the Pacific as well, who've had a bit of a slower start of the season, and Edmonton and Calgary are blowing it up right now. But Pacific generally is the weakest division in recent years, and the Central's generally been the toughest division in recent years. I think the Metro and the Atlantic. To be fair, I think it's harder to tell because of last season and having teams play only in their division. Well, the remade divisions where there was reshed, Canadian division completely shuffled the pack, and so every division was affected. And teams were moved around, so the divisions were changed. Um, Makes it interesting, but I see the Central being the toughest long term. Um, but we'll see what happens. Well, the Central's my favourite. Uh, Teams that I've in the past that I've looked at and gone, I like that style of player, what that organisation's about. Um, no, I don't think it was a mistake. They would still be playing in the same division if they were in Minnesota. But attendances were dropping. I mean, yeah, they got to Stanley Cup finals, and just imagine if they won those Stanley Cup finals, they may not have moved. But ownership was a mess. Attendances were low. I don't think it was a mistake. I don't, because Texas has got the most professional hockey teams outside of Canada in North America. So it's had its benefits. I don't think it was a mistake. I think, you know, but had Minnesota not been moved and stayed as the North Stars, guess what? They were still in the Central Division right now. So I'm old enough to remember the North Stars. That's the scary thing. I really actually am. I am. God, I'm that old. I am old enough to remember the North Stars playing in Minnesota. But it wasn't very long before the Minnesota Wild were, it was only 4 years before the NHL went, no, we need a team in Minnesota. Um, the amount of US players that have been developed through University of Minnesota and have come through junior hockey and then gone into the professional ranks, not just in the NHL, but in hockey in general. It's called the state of hockey for a reason. It is the state's sport, basically, the biggest sport in Minnesota. So not to have an NHL team there would be a mistake. The fact they went 4 seasons without, um, they quickly realised, no, we need to have a team in Minnesota. But had the North Stars not moved, they would still be a Central Division team. The irony of that, the irony of that, they would still be a Central Division team. As on the current geographical way that the divisions are aligned. But no, I don't think it was a mistake. But relocation is generally not the best solution. I think we've reached the maximum number of teams we're going to have in the NHL. I can't see them getting bigger than 32 teams because fixturing becomes a nightmare. And relocation is less likely now than what it was 10 years ago. But look at the 70s and the 80s, teams were moved all the time, especially in the 70s. It was a very unstable decade for the NHL. Um, and then we get into the 90s and teams are still being relocated. The last team to be relocated was Atlanta to Winnipeg. But I love the original Jets, so as soon as they came back, I was like, yeah, it happened. So we've only had one relocation in what since 2011. I think one relocation in 27 years. Whereas before that, relocations were very commonplace. We've got more stability in the league now, better ownership with teams now. The NHL wants to stay in those locations. They've worked out stability is key to revenue. Um, and look, Buffalo's never been relocated. They've been terrible for over a decade, but the fans keep turning up. Florida have been they've been called Blue Florida. They've suddenly got good. Patience pays off. Carolina, got them in Carolina. They're getting good again, and they've been 2 Stanley Cup finals since they've been in Carolina. So the only reason why they moved from Hartford was not because they didn't love, Hartford didn't love them. They were playing in a shopping mall. Their arena was inside a shopping centre, which is no longer there. Winnipeg moved because the NHL, with the WHA expansion in '79, only one of the WHA teams is still in the same location, and that's Edmonton. And they have money issues. Every single WHA team has had money problems at some point, and it's not to do with attendance. Money issues. Hartford have moved, Quebec have moved, Winnipeg has moved, Edmonton stayed. Winnipeg got their team back. And why it hasn't worked in Atlanta is for several reasons. And it's amazing because it's one of the biggest sports markets in the US, and the NHL has never got it to work for a variety of reasons. But brilliant players have played for it, the Atlanta Flames and the Atlanta Thrashers, and a lot of it's to do with ownership. It's not to do with the people of Atlanta not buying into the sport in a non-traditional location. Not at all. Attendances were not the lowest. Money was one of the reasons in the '70s, but the '70s teams were moving all over the place. And with the Thrashers, it wasn't because fans didn't turn up, but they made the playoffs once, and ownership was horrifically poor, and they didn't have a building. Whereas with Arizona, they're trying to sort out a building and a long-term plan. They plan, they're going to Tempe soon. Um, their AHL has not got any plans to move from Tucson. They've stuck it out, but lack of success. Suddenly, Florida and Carolina are suddenly starting to have success again. Results, playing well, making playoffs. Florida needs to win a round in the playoffs, would be nice. They've only done it once in '96, where they got the Stanley Cup final. Apart from that, they've never won a round. No, they won't. They won't. Quebec City is not the biggest sports market, even in Canada. And then which team? You only do it by relocation. It's got to be profitable long term. And while the Nordiques were a pretty solid franchise, by the end they became a basket case of a franchise, and players were refusing to sign there, and the ownership moved to Colorado. But no, yeah, it would cost you more to run the team as well north of the border unless the Canadian dollar strengthens. The Canadian dollar has a lot to do with it, and there's been periods where the Canadian dollar has been quite good. So it's been profitable. It costs more to run a team in Canada when you're paying your bills in US dollars and your wages. It actually ironically costs an owner more to make the same amount of money. So if a Canadian team starts making losses with the way the Canadian dollar is against the US dollar, it becomes a bit more problematic. And economics, not because of a lack of fans and not because of a lack of interest, it's economics. It would cost an owner more to run the team and pay salaries, plus the tax rate is higher, so getting free agents to sign. And Quebec City is a small city, it's a small sports market. It's all about the market size and market share. That's the problem. That is the problem. Least favorite NHL team. A hard one. That is a hard one. Really hard. Teams that I don't watch a lot of games. That is a difficult one. That is actually quite hard. I'm not a fan of the Ducks and the Kings, and I'm not overly a fan of the Oilers. I like the battle of Alberta. I like the battle of Alberta between Edmonton and Calgary because that just is fun when that goes off. But not a big fan of Toronto. Not a massive fan of Montreal either. I like seeing the Canadians lose, partly because of their fan base, but not because of the team. There are some teams I watch more than others as a neutral. I don't really have it's hard. I don't hate any team. I just a good friend of mine is a Sharks fan. Another good friend's a Rangers fan, and I like what the Rangers bring to the table. I'm not saying they're my favourite team, but I like what they bring to the table. And I'm not really a big fan of any of the original six, to be brutally honest. I, I just I just can't get myself up for like an original six game. I don't enjoy it as much. I like seeing them lose more than other teams. Anyway, there's one for you. Um, Vancouver, I'm not a big fan of them, but it's more the direction that the organisation taking rather than the players they've got or the fan base. Because I've got friends who are Canucks fans. I've got friends. I think the two Southern Californian teams, Anaheim and LA. I'm not a big fan of the Dallas Stars, but probably because Central Division, the Jets play them a lot. You get to see them more often. You get a bit more of a dislike. Um, but I wouldn't say there's a team I outright hate. I'm just not a big fan of the original six. I like to see them get beaten. Yeah, warm fuzzy feeling. Um, I'm not a big fan of Boston, but I like watching Boston games, especially when there's a bit of rough and tumble. I don't really like many of the Eastern Conference teams. If I'm brutally honest, I have a more of a soft spot for Western Conference teams. Partly because the two teams I follow are in the Western Conference, and they're both in the same division. They were in different divisions. I like what Vegas has brought to the table. I've watched a few Kraken games now, and I just want to see how they do. I'm surprised they haven't got a mascot sorted out yet, like a Cthulhu style kind of mascot, like a giant squid or octopus kind of. That would be kind of cool. But then Detroit will go, well, we have the octopus throwing kind of thing. Um, but no, I don't. I don't know. It's a difficult one. Detroit is my favourite one of the original six franchises, uh, and so there's that. Part of that is drawn out of like the Avalanche Detroit rivalry in the '90s, which was just fun to watch. And they were in the same conference at the time, so it was always the semi-finals that they would meet. Whereas now, if Colorado and Detroit are going to meet, it has to be in the Stanley Cup final. But that was just a fun rivalry to watch. Just like, I had no dog in the fight. It was just fun to watch. So Detroit's my favourite original six franchise, but I don't really have a least favourite overall. I just prefer when two original six teams are playing. I love watching, you know, Toronto, Montreal, or Toronto, Boston, or Chicago, Detroit, um, New York, Boston, New York, Toronto. I like watching when the original six play each other because I don't have a dog in the fight. But I like to see Detroit do well, um, especially like the history of that team. And they had the longest playoff streak in the expansion era from '67 onwards. I think of 20, almost my entire lifetime, basically, up to when they were last in the playoffs. So their playoff history from 1990 to 2015, that was basically my lifetime because I was born in '89. So until recently, Detroit mirrored my lifetime, basically, with their playoff appearances and their consistency. You have to admire their consistency until recent times of just constantly making the playoffs and then winning in those playoffs. You can't dislike Stevie Eiserman. And I used to love Bob Probert as well, but then he played for Chicago, and I was like, "What are you doing?" Uh, but no, yeah, the original six. Detroit's my favorite of the original six. But I'm not a big fan of the Eastern Conference. To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, they get the best ratings, yes. Turf Moor. Well, I like the fact that in when it comes to the under 21s, because obviously we've got a game tomorrow night at Wembley, that they do take games on the road to round the grounds, and that's great for Burnley and Turf Moor and all that. Um, I don't know. Burnley, fans of the Football League, hotbed of the English game. I'm not against it. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. Uh, Turf Moor, hostile crowd for the opposition, um, and yeah, Turf Moor's a very hostile stadium to play games in. It's a hostile atmosphere. It's an old school stadium, and a good crowd will be a good boost for these young players. Regardless of the result, I actually don't mind occasionally games being taken on the road for the women. The women do it. It's the women's game. Uh, they take it around the various league grounds, smaller league grounds as well. And obviously, when Wembley was being rebuilt, England took games on the road, so clubs applied to have the England team, play games at their stadium. So I think it's a good thing, personally. It's a good thing for me. Um, but yeah, I'm going to call it a day because I've been going for over 3 hours now. It's been we've had an interesting topic with the cricket, and discussing ha- you know injury prone players and gone on to the NHL, and so it's been interesting. We've done a bit of rugby as well. Didn't get on to any rugby league, which I found interesting, but we can always get a rugby league discussion in there. I'm going to start doing my NRL 2022 season previews, I think, soon. At some point in the evenings, I think I'll start doing them one or two a night each night next week, while we're in this football international. But I might even do them all Saturday. To be fair, if England's game is going to be on the Friday tomorrow night, I might do the NRL previews Saturday, because I'm not doing anything Saturday. So that we might get some 2022 season previews for the NRL. So look out for that. And of course, I'll keep updated with the Ottawa Senators situation. But the NHL one, it's going to be very late in the day if they cancel the game late on. If they were going to cancel it, I think they would have done it by now. But we'll have to see what comes out with these latest test results. And if the Senators game is cancelled, that could pose a problem for the NHL with fixturing, and we might see other teams ramp up their testing as well. And then the NHLPA may have to go back to its members and say, look, we're going to have to mandate daily testing again and have a vote on it, and then we might see a suspension of the season, which the NHL cannot afford with the Olympics. So thank you very much, obviously, for all your questions, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon. That